It's election night in America, and a nation in crisis is at a crossroads.
We're counting down to the first exit polls and the first results as our coverage begins now.
Across the nation, in red states and blue states and swing states, voters are delivering their verdict on a norm-shattering president and two starkly different visions of America's future.
The President of the United States lied to the American people, and he is unfit for this job.
If Biden wins, your country is gone.
Tonight, President Donald Trump fighting for a second term as a deadly pandemic gets worse on his watch.
All they want to talk about is COVID, 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 COVID.
But look, I got it, and I'm here right now.
Former Vice President Joe Biden battling to lead the country after 4 years of political turmoil and division.
There is no place for hate in America. Period. None.
It's a historic clash for the candidates and their running mates. Senator Kamala Harris aiming to be the first woman and person of color as vice president.
When we vote, things change. When we vote, we win.
Vice President Mike Pence hoping to remain as President Trump's loyal lieutenant.
We will make America great again.
With voters now flocking to the polls after record-breaking early turnout. How and when will this election be decided?
This is the most important election in the history of our country.
The power to change the country is in your hands.
This is CNN's coverage of election night in America.
We are going to keep on winning, winning, winning.
The race for the White House, the balance of power, and the challenges facing the nation.
There's not a damn thing America can't do when we decide to do it together.
The people are choosing. The world is watching. And anything is possible until the last vote.
This is a live view from high above Washington as Americans are deciding who will serve in the White House for the next 4 years. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the CNN Election Center. Right now, voters are in the final hours of making a monumental decision for this country about who will lead us through the next 4 years, former Vice President Joe Biden or President Donald Trump. We're counting down to the first results from our exit polls. In about an hour, we'll get an early read on what voters are thinking as they cast their ballots. Then, buckle up for a suspenseful night. Voters in all 50 states are having their say in the heated fight for 270 electoral votes, the number needed to win the White House. 14 of those states are competitive battlegrounds that will ultimately decide the election. Georgia is the first key race of the night at 7 Eastern when we get the first big round of results. Democrats taking a shot at turning that traditionally red state blue. A half hour later, North Carolina and Ohio are in the spotlight with President Trump on defense in those states that he won 4 years ago. At 8 Eastern, the last polls close in Florida, the ultimate swing state and a must-win for the president, with New Hampshire and crucial Pennsylvania also in play. At 9 Eastern, we'll be watching key races in 6 states: Arizona, Colorado, Michigan, Minnesota, Texas, and Wisconsin. Michigan and Wisconsin are especially critical as states that sealed President Trump's win in 2016. At 10 Eastern, Iowa and Nevada are the races to watch as we get deeper and deeper into the night and the fight for electoral votes goes into overdrive. We're covering it all, along with Jake Tapper and our entire political team. Jake.
Wolf, we're keeping an eye on voting underway across the country, especially in those key battleground states. Remember, even before today, more than 102 million Americans had already voted in person or by mail. That's adding to the unpredictability of this election. We don't know if we will learn the winner tonight or tomorrow or possibly after that. We're going to let the voters lead the way, and we are going to be patient. Let's check in with our campaign correspondents. First to Jeff Delaney with former Vice President Biden in Wilmington, Delaware. Jeff, what are you hearing from inside the Biden campaign?
Well, Jake, Joe Biden had an air of confidence in his step today as he was out on the campaign trail. And that was the significant part. He was out on the campaign trail. That is something that he has missed throughout this pandemic, when he has decided to campaign in an entirely different way. He wanted, I'm told, to hear the chants. He wanted to see the people. That is something that he loves to do. He loves campaigning, as we know. Of course, this is his third bid for the presidency, but this was entirely different. So he went to his hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania. He went to Philadelphia. He's even going to hold an event right here in Wilmington, Delaware, before retreating with his family. But Jake, that speaks to a larger point here. Democrats are confident heading into this election evening. The Biden campaign is confident, but there is a question. Was enough done? Because how they handled coronavirus essentially changed how they campaigned. They transitioned this to a virtual campaign some 8 months ago and largely stuck with that until the very end here. That, meant that Democrats were organizing in a very different way. The backbone of most winning Democratic campaigns have been door-to-door, on the ground. That's what won the White House for Barack Obama and the vice presidency for Joe Biden. So talking to campaign officials said, we have no regrets how we ran this campaign, but they do have wonders if they did the right thing and if the pandemic will impact their turnout tonight. Jake?
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thanks so much. Now to Caitlin Collins. She's covering President Trump. He's at the White House right now. Caitlin, what are you learning about the president's thinking?
Well, so far, Jake, he is not weighing considering giving a concession speech or an acceptance speech tonight because the president is deeply superstitious. So he is approaching this almost exactly the way he did 4 years ago in 2016 when there was no victory speech written for the president until much later into the evening. And even then, Jake, the president refused to look at that speech that aides had prepared for him because he was so worried that it would jinx the outcome of the election. So earlier today, he went to his campaign headquarters. He was not on the campaign trail like Joe Biden was, and he huddled with senior staff and then came out, said he is not considering either way. He is waiting to see what happens as he is being updated by officials who are at the campaign headquarters here at the White House on what's going on in those critical states and what they're seeing on the ground in places like Pennsylvania, somewhere the president has tried to sow doubt about how those votes are going to be counted in the days to come if it's not in his favor. So we do know they're planning a celebration, some kind of event here, at least at the White House tonight, Jake, where they've invited hundreds of people who are going to be tested for coronavirus at the Trump Hotel beforehand. But the question is, when are they going to see the president and what is he going to say?
All right, Caitlin Collins at the White House. Thank you so much. I'm here with Abby Phillip and Dana Bash. And Dana, it's nerve-wracking. The whole country's on the edge of their seats. What is the main thing right now that you're looking for? What are you looking to?
Well, maybe the obvious, which is turnout. And this is one of the most fascinating things that I've been watching, and as I've been in touch with sources in both campaigns, as I'm sure you both have as well, that so much of this is new because there was such record early voting because we're in a pandemic election. I mean, 100 million people voting early. And so what each side is trying to do, obviously, is to maximize their day of vote because they feel like they have a pretty good sense of the chunk of the vote that has come in. Not a real sense because they don't know exactly how each voter, if they're affiliated with a party, actually voted because this is a kind of a scrambled election. But that is what is going on right now. The Trump campaign in particular, they have turned their get out the vote operation on in a big way. They have volunteers who are coordinating other volunteers who are each assigned like 10 to 12 people, and to hammer them every single hour if they haven't voted, get out and vote. And we'll see if it ultimately is successful.
And of course, they have a lot of people that they have to do that for because so many of their voters are going to show up on Election Day. They've got to follow up with a lot of these people to make sure that they get out there. And that's what makes the task for the Trump campaign today difficult. But what we're seeing across the country, the high turnout, I think it really is pointing to a really important factor. People will vote if you give them the opportunity to.
So true.
There is a lot of interest in this election on both sides of the aisle. And I think that we're going to see tonight potentially something scrambling conventional wisdoms about what turnout really means for both parties.
And it's interesting because I've seen a lot of Republican operatives not affiliated with the Trump campaign kind of wringing their hands at the fact that the Republican Party this election seems to be taking the position of making it less easy to vote, making it tougher to vote. And how is that a Republican position? How is that a Democratic position, small d Democratic?
Right.
The idea of a major party trying to make it tougher for the American people to exercise that sacred right.
Totally wringing their hands. It doesn't make any sense. It's not American. And just like you said, I mean, let's just say before we have any idea what the votes are going to be. We do know that there is incredible enthusiasm. And how fabulous is that? I mean, I know I probably sound super corny, but it's true.
It's true.
It's really
If we get up to
remarkable.
65–70% participation.
Can you imagine? That's the way it should be, even more. But the fact that we would even get to that point is pretty historic.
The idea that Americans don't want to vote is not the case. They do. They are. We could have 150, 160 million people going out and voting. The problem, though, with what President Trump did in this election in terms of trying to undermine the electoral system is the question about what happens tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Do Republicans double down on some of these positions that even Republican lawyers believe are really indefensible because they are really aimed at preventing people from having access to the ballot? But we were just talking about turnout. President Trump wants his people to come out to the ballot box.
Right.
It does not make sense to make it harder for those people to vote either. So how long can that kind of position continue?
What are you looking for in terms of if you were at Biden headquarters right now? I would be looking at, really honestly, you can talk about Georgia and Arizona all you want. I would be looking at Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, those three. If he wins those three and keeps the Clinton states, that's it.
It's all about the blue wall. I mean, yeah, sure. Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, those would all be for Biden. Great if he could win them. But holding on to the blue wall is going to be the most important thing for him tonight, not just because of the path to 270, but also preserving that part of the country for the Democratic Party. It really ends a narrative that President Trump wants, which is that he has changed the map permanently.
And I'll go even deeper into those states and others, which is the urban areas. I would be looking, and they are looking, we know this, at the turnout levels in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, in Detroit.
And the suburbs.
And the suburbs.
Yeah.
The suburbs are so incredibly key for a couple of reasons. One is Hillary Clinton did well in the suburbs, but not well enough, not enough to counterbalance the unprecedented turnout that Donald Trump had in Republican territories. And as we know, and as the Trump campaign will tell you in private moments, the suburbs, they're not the place for Donald Trump anymore. We saw that in 2018, and it hasn't changed in 2020.
All right, Wolf.
All right, Jake, thanks very much. John King's with me over here at the Magic Wall. We're going to be spending a lot of time at this Magic Wall in the course of the next many, many hours. John, first of all, walk us through the road to 270, first for the former vice president.
You ready?
Yep.
Ready? It's going to be a fun night. Caution is the watchword tonight because results are going to come in differently, right? Some states will count the early votes first. Some states will count the early votes last. Take your time, be patient, hang with us all night long. We'll get there. Here's where we start. The solid red states, solid Trump. That adds up to 125 electoral votes. The solid blue states, 203. Those are Joe Biden states. We don't expect anything on this map to change. So that's the foundation from where they start. Let's go back to 2016 and the stunning Trump map there to walk through sort of the stakes tonight. You just heard the conversation with Abby and Jake and Dana. If Joe Biden can get the blue wall back, 1, 2, 3, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, game over. You can do it right there. The Democrats just get those three back. Joe Biden was leading in the polls in all three of those states, and Michigan quite comfortably at the end. That could be it. That could be game over. But let me go back to this. We're going to be waiting for these, right? So let's stay with the Trump map. We know these ones are going to be slow tonight, could actually go into tomorrow and beyond. Here's the potential tonight. The opportunity for Joe Biden and the Democrats is to change this map. Donald Trump changed it 4 years ago. Joe Biden can change it this year. What if, as we wait for the blue wall states, Joe Biden can get North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida? Forget the blue wall. He's already president of the United States. If he holds the other Clinton states and does well down here, if these states are truly changing at the pace the Democrats think they might be, it is possible to do it here. Joe Biden has aspirations to win out here. Again, a map-changing win that would be if you could take Arizona. Not since Bill Clinton has Arizona gone, and that was with a lot of help from Ross Perot a long time ago. So Joe Biden has aspirations to change the map down here, even as he tries to rebuild the Democratic strength up here. That's a possibility. We need to watch it play out. Democrats have dreams about Texas. They think, you know what, we're actually in play in Ohio, maybe in Iowa. We're going to watch this play out, right? So we're going to start with a conservative perspective that we expect the Trump states to be tough for Biden to get. But North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, Arizona later in the night, these are states we do expect to count pretty quickly when they do count. So we will get some clues early on. This is Joe Biden's dream path down here, and he obviously hopes here, here, and here. Look at that potential. That's the Democrats see this potential on the table tonight. Capital P, potential, but underline it as a big if right now. If Joe Biden can do anything close to this, they think he can bring the Senate with him, and the Democrats will take the Senate majority. But remember, Donald Trump surprised us 4 years ago. He is perfectly capable of a giant Election Day turnout that surprises us again. The challenge is this is a different map. The hill is steeper. He was more behind at the end than he was 4 years ago. So how does Donald Trump do it? The critical part for Donald Trump is holding the states that do tend to be, let me bring this here, the states that do tend to be more Republican. He has to hold North Carolina. He absolutely has to hold Florida, and it's 29. Let me do this, it should get quicker. And he absolutely has to hold Georgia. The president has to start there, right? So that would keep the president okay, even if he holds those there, let's say Biden does take some of these away, right? If Biden were to take these back, now, how does Donald Trump make that up? That's the problem. That's the problem. There's nothing of the Clinton states that we think Donald Trump can change. Therefore, he's got to find something up here to do it.
So what are Trump's best options right now? It seems like Biden has more possible paths to 270 than the president does.
Yeah, Biden is at a restaurant with a lot of options on the menu. Donald Trump has a very narrow path, because I just mentioned, even if he holds these, even if he holds Arizona, he's got to find something up here, right? Something up here, because I should have done this at the beginning. The expectation is, we'll see what happens at the end of the night. The expectation is that Joe Biden wins the congressional district up in Maine. The expectation is, among even Republicans, that Joe Biden picks up a congressional district here in Nebraska. Maine and Nebraska, 2 states, award their electoral votes by congressional district. So if you do something like this, then you have Joe Biden at 280, which is why the President of the United States spent so much time here in the end of the campaign. It's a possibility. This all comes down to Pennsylvania. If it plays out something like this, Michigan had a healthy Biden lead at the end. Wisconsin had a decent Biden lead at the end. If he can hold those 2, Trump can hold the other Trump states. If these are the only 2 he gives up, then it could come down to a long fight for Pennsylvania. I say long fight because Pennsylvania, we know there'll be court challenges. We also know a lot of the early votes, the absentee votes, won't be counted until late tonight. Even some counties say not until tomorrow morning. So there is a scenario where it comes down to 1 state. That's the big question tonight. Do we have sort of a boxing match state by state, or is there a late break? Is there a wave to Biden? Or is this massive Election Day turnout that surprises us and keeps one of those red, not turn one of those red?
Florida, we should know relatively soon.
Florida, we should. And I'm going to move over here, Wolf, as we do. That is the key tonight. There are some states we're going to have to wait for. We're going to have to ask your patience. Our team is going to be patient and very, very cautious. However, there are some states. This is 2000. We'll start 2020. We'll start filling this in a couple of hours. But let's go back to the 2016 map. There are some states. I mentioned North Carolina. That's one. There's a bit of a delay there in the reporting the results because they've left some polling places open past normal hours just to make up for some glitches this morning. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's a good thing. You're giving people more time to vote. But when we get North Carolina's results, we think they'll come in quickly. Then you mentioned Florida. Well, if Donald Trump's path to the presidency, to re-election, has to include Florida.
By the way, let me interrupt for a minute. We're getting some live pictures of Biden in Wilmington, Delaware, right now, his hometown. There you can see, John, if you turn around, you can see him there. I don't know if he's going to speak to reporters or not speak to reporters, but maybe we should listen in and see what he has to say, if anything.
Well, because we're getting overwhelming support from women voters.
Why do you think that is, President?
Well, I think it's because 2 reasons. One, all that I've done from violence against women and my activities relating to access for women opportunities to Donald Trump.
Mr. Vice President, this has clearly been an unprecedented campaign given the pandemic. Just looking back, the reflection moments, are there any lessons learned, any regrets, anything you would change?
No, there's not. I mean, as you guys know, have had to cover me for a long time. I haven't changed what I've been saying since the day I announced. And the day I announced, everybody thought that I was way off pace. And by the way, I don't mean that as I'm not being critical of anybody else. I'm just saying that I believe very, very strongly, I really mean it, that we have to restore decency and honor in our system, or it's going to fall apart. Secondly, I believe extremely strongly, and I know you've all watched it from the very beginning, that we have to rebuild the middle class. We have to give ordinary people a fighting chance. They can do anything when you give them a chance. And thirdly, we have to unite the country. Well, all 3 of those things were viewed as either too much of a reach or not a reach enough. And I haven't changed my view. And so, you know, this is, for example, I didn't realize this was here. The Reverend Herring, who was one of the 5 major leaders in the black community when I got started, in Wilmington back when I was a kid, when I started off as a lifeguard. My good luck charm is I always go back to where I started every election I go by. So we're going to go back by Price's Run swimming pool, and it was the leadership in the community from here, from Riverside all the way up to Price's Run on the east side was overwhelmingly African American, but it all was in the black church. The black church was the heart and soul of the entire movement for people here, and so it's and when I started off as a kid getting involved, I had a job at a nice country club kind of pool as a lifeguard. I wanted to work on the east side because I knew I played ball with a lot of great black athletes, but I knew, I didn't know them. We knew each other. We were friends, but I didn't know them, and it was a great education. It was like the Green Mile, you see the movie? Well, it's like that. You begin to, when you realize that the people I've known for a long time that, they lived in the middle of a city and a county that was white, and they didn't know anybody. They knew, but they didn't know anybody. And it was a real education for me. I'm not being melodramatic. It really was. And I think I've told a couple of you, the guys who, and there were men, there were all the lifeguards at that time, the guys who got the jobs were usually the relatively well-known athletes who they hired. And, there were people, all the 13 lifeguards I worked with, all of them became really successful in their lives. And, but it was interesting that we'd sit and talk, and they'd ask me questions that stunned me that were asked. Like, I think I've told you before, Jamie asked me, do you have a jerry can, meaning a 5-gallon can for gasoline? I said, no, what do you need a jerry can for? I'm going to go see my grandmother. I said, what's she needed for her? Oil burn or something? He said, no, she lives in North Carolina. I can't stop at any gas stations. We can't stop. Got to have my... things like that were sort of eye-opening for me.
Do you think things are better now or worse?
Well, I think they're better now. I know they're better now. And you see things happening here that are changing the way in which people interact. There's a lot more. I got involved running for the county council because I thought it was unfair that there was redlining in the county. People weren't able to move. That's changed a lot. And so the whole range of things have changed. But there's still a great need. But what's happening is that there's people who are in a position that they're getting engaged now. And it's mainly, like I said, when you had guys like Reverend Herring, we used to I'd go to Mass and then go down and sit in his church, and we'd talk about, plan about what we're going to do. We're going to desegregate a movie theater. We're going to march for something. And by the way, I'm not making myself out to be something special. It was just a lot of folks my age got engaged, and that's how I got engaged.
What do you know about America, or what do you think about America that you didn't know in 1972 or 1988 or 2008? Just looking back over the course of your career and the moment you're at right now.
Well, there's a whole lot. Hopefully, with age comes a little bit of wisdom. What I know is that hadn't changed is my absolute belief in the American people. You give them an even shot, they can do anything. They really can.
What do you guys think President Trump claims victory tonight, and it's not clear that he won? What's your plan for that? Via tweet or otherwise? Because we know, based on our reporting at Axios, that that's what he plans to do.
Well, look, like I said, you heard me use the line today several times. Presidents can't determine what votes counted and not counted. And, voters determine who's president. This isn't going to... No matter what he does, no matter what he says, the votes are going to be counted.
Do you feel a responsibility to respond, though, or say something?
No, I don't. Look, it depends on what he says and how he says it, but, I don't feel a responsibility to respond. And by the way, as you've seen some of the articles written, this talk about there being disruptions and things like that, he's embarrassing Republicans. Republicans are walking away from him. I mean, but look, like I said, I'm superstitious about predicting what an outcome is going to be until it happens. That's sort of who I am, how I've always run. And but I'm hopeful.
How do you
That's all right.
guys, we gotta go. Thank you. Early return. What are you hearing today?
Well, what I'm hearing is that there's overwhelming turnout, and overwhelming turnout, particularly of young people, of women, and there's an overwhelming turnout among African Americans, for example, in Georgia and Florida, over the age of 65. So, I mean, the things that are happening bode well for the base that has been supporting it. But we'll see. We'll see.
What do you think about you guys have to go? Let's go. You guys have to go, Mariana. I feel positive that you are on the path to winning.
Well, you know, I don't know. We don't know how this is going to come in. For example, if Florida came in by 1, it's over. Done. If Florida doesn't come in, and you know what happens is the early votes occur in some other states, I think we're going to do well we're going to reestablish that blue wall. I feel good about that. We'll see what, but it's just so uncertain. Look, you can't think of an election in the recent past where so many states are up for grabs. The idea, I'm in play in Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida. I mean, come on. I mean, Texas? I don't.
Does Ohio still win, given the tradition of presidential nominees going on to win the presidency because of their win in Ohio?
Well, but, you know, there's also been other traditions. They haven't been able to win unless they won Pennsylvania. There's all kinds of traditions. The only thing you know is traditions are made to be broken. There's just so much in play right now, and there's such overwhelming vote out there. We'll see. And if there's something to talk about tonight, I'll talk about it. If not, I'll wait till the votes are counted the next day.
Great,
okay?
Thank you so much.
Vice President.
Joe Biden answering reporters' questions. He's been doing that a few times in the course of today, saying he's superstitious, doesn't want to make any predictions about what's going to happen later tonight. We're getting closer and closer to our first exit polls, including insights into how the coronavirus pandemic is influencing voters. And as we watch the Election Day turnout in Pennsylvania and other key battlegrounds, we're going to tell you how soon we expect to get results from states that will decide the election. It's all ahead. We'll be right back.
And we're back in the election center awaiting the first exit polls on the voters, for the voters on the issues they care about most. We're also standing by for the first results, actual votes of the night, as voters are still casting ballots right now in those all-important battleground states across the country. Let's check in with our battleground correspondents. First to Florida, 29 electoral votes. Randy Kay is at a polling place in Lighthouse Point, which is just outside Fort Lauderdale. Randy, how's voting going there?
Voting was going pretty smoothly here, Jake. In fact, one election official here in Broward County, where we are, called this election day boring. That's how well it was going, but it's certainly not boring anymore, Jake. We're getting word from a federal judge in U.S. District Court that he is ordering the United States Postal Service now to sweep processing facilities in underperforming districts. They are basically looking for ballots. We know that there were a record number of mail-in ballots this election season. So here's what's happening. The United States Postal Service apparently told the judge that they had received about 300,000 ballots. They received them, but they were never scanned for delivery. So what this means is that the post office got them, but there's no record that they were ever sent out to be delivered. It doesn't mean that none of those 300,000 ballots were delivered, but there is simply no record of them. So this judge has ordered the United States Postal Service to sweep these facilities starting by 3 p.m. today, and then he wants a report on that sweep by this afternoon some point, and that does include many battleground states that don't allow ballots to be counted after Election Day, so timing is of the essence, Jake.
All right, Randy Kay in Broward County, Florida, thank you so much. Let's go to Pennsylvania now. Kate Baldwin is in Bensalem, which is outside the great city of Philadelphia. Kate, what's happening at your location?
Hey there, Jake. Here at Bensalem High School, it has been a very busy day. I'm told that voters started lining up here at 5:30 this morning for the polls to open at 7. And throughout the county, we've heard reports of wait times of 3 to 4 hours. according to one of the county commissioner, not because of any problems, but because of sheer turnout. At this location, they've already seen double what they normally get in terms of turnout, and still, obviously, there are hours left to go. Here is why this matters so much. Bucks County is the most competitive of the suburban counties outside of Philadelphia. President Trump was here Saturday. Joe Biden was here before that. This is a county, and these are voters that both campaigns desperately want in order to secure this state. Hillary Clinton barely won this county 4 years ago. We'll have to wait and see exactly what happens. No big lines now, but if you look behind me, way down there, towards those windows, the line was all the way down there this morning and doubled back. Turnout here has been huge. We'll see what the next hours bring. Jake?
All right, Kate Baldwin and one of the collar counties outside Philadelphia. Wolf?
All right, thanks very much, Jake. Some states will be faster or slower than other states to report results. I want to walk over to Pamela Brown at our voting desk. She's looking closely. Which states are going to be reporting more quickly than other states?
Well, Wolf, we do expect speedy results in some key battleground states, starting with Florida. This, of course, is one of the biggest prizes here in Florida. Some results are expected in the 7 p.m. Eastern hour. Mostly counting is typically finished on election night, so we should be finding out results there in Florida tonight. Now, let's move over to Georgia here. Georgia polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern, and most votes are expected to be counted on election night. Turning over to North Carolina now. The state is delaying results, we learned today, for at least 45 minutes after extended voting at 4 locations, but they still expect to finish most counting on election night. And the deadline for mail-in ballots to arrive later than usual, November 12th. So that could come into play tonight, depending on how tight it is. In Ohio, the all-important state of Ohio, the state typically finishes counting on election night or the next day. That is still the hope. And then in Texas, we do expect to find out results in the 8 p.m. hour. Typically, the state finishes most vote counting on election night. And then there's Arizona. Of course, we've been talking a lot about Arizona. The results are expected in the 10 p.m. hour. The state typically has large numbers of ballots to count after election night. But also, Wolf, it's a state that has a lot of experience with mail-in ballots.
So, Pamela, which states do we expect to be reporting, let's say, more slowly?
3 crucial states, well, that could swing this election one direction or the other, starting with Wisconsin here. We know that this is a state that didn't start opening up their ballots until today. They expect to finish counting by Wednesday, November 4th. And then in Michigan had a little bit of a head start. Some results are expected in the 8 p.m. Eastern hour there, and the state expects to finish counting by Friday, November 6th at the latest. And then you have Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania could keep us on the edge of our seats. They didn't start opening up those ballots until today. We know that some counties are going to wait until tomorrow to open up the mail-in ballots. Some are starting today. The Secretary of State said expect the results by Friday of this week, Wolf.
Very, very interesting indeed. We're watching all of this very, very closely together with all of our reporters, our analysts, our experts. Still ahead at the top of the hour, the first exit poll results, an early snapshot of who's voting and why. We'll be right back. An impressive view. Look at this, of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in the White House as Americans are deciding who will serve in the White House for the next 4 years. We're standing by for our first exit poll results. Around the top of the hour, we'll get an early sense of how the coronavirus crisis may be shaping this election. And we're also monitoring the final hours of voting in key battleground states that will ultimately decide the next president of the United States. Let's go back to John King. He's here at the Magic Wall. So what can we expect, John, when the results first start coming in?
I think one of the things to expect is the unexpected in terms of the colors you're used to seeing on this map. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We're going to keep saying this throughout the night. We need to be patient. But let's say, I'm going to just pick a state. Let's say Georgia. We don't know how Georgia's going to end up tonight, right? The Biden campaign says they're competitive there. They believe there's African-American turnout that could make Georgia blue. But let's say Georgia out of the box, the first dump of votes is overwhelmingly mail-in early voting. Well, that we know is disproportionately Democratic. So you might see in a place like Georgia, even in places that are outside of the cities, you might see a lot of blue on this map, not just in Georgia, but other states as well, in places that are normally red. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Just this means the first thing they processed were the absentee votings or the mail-in votes, and we know that those are disproportionately Democrat. The flip side of that, Wolf, is we know, for example, there are at least a half dozen counties, maybe more in Pennsylvania, that have said they're overwhelmed on Election Day. They're not going to count those mail-in ballots, the early ballots, until very late tonight. Some of them say they won't even start until tomorrow morning. So what does that mean? You may see parts of this map. Now, Donald Trump had a lot of red here to begin with, but you may see the margins lopsided. because it's all election day vote that we're getting early on. So you may see, let's see how many Democrats turned out today, but you may see places on the map in a place like Pennsylvania, but even in states that are just not traditionally battlegrounds. You might see blue in states that are normally red. You might see red in places that are normally blue. Perfectly understandable. We're just going to have to walk through this. We'll be transparent about what we know. Are these early ballots? That's why there's a lot of blue. Is this all election day count? That's why it looks like it looks. We're going to have to walk through this night. It will be like no other, and we'll just get through it. But we also will get clues. They're all, and by the way, everything you see once the polls close is live votes. They're real votes. They just may come in sort of an odd order that make things interesting. But remember 2016, though, when we do start to get votes and Kentucky, Ohio starts to close early. Remember back in 2016, the first signs that Donald Trump was turning out Republican voters beyond expectations came right along here when we first got the results in Kentucky, up here along the Ohio border, places like Bracken County. No, tiny, right? 106 out of 120 counties in terms of the population. This was not going to change the state, and we knew Kentucky was going to go red, but what did we learn? Donald Trump was running it up, that people were coming out of the woodwork, and that he was by significant margins overperforming past Republican nominees. Inroads in blue-collar, white, rural America that helped Donald Trump to his victory. Why did that matter? We knew Kentucky was going to go red 4 years ago, but there are voters just like that in southern Ohio. And we started to see that as well. And guess what? If you follow it over, there are voters just like that in southwestern Pennsylvania. That was the first sign of the night. So that's what we'll be looking for tonight when we start to get votes out of Kentucky, out of Indiana, out of Ohio, match those counties up, especially the small rural places. One of the key tests tonight, can Donald Trump surge turnout on Election Day? We'll get some early clues in those results. And then Pam was talking earlier about other results. We do expect North Carolina. There's a delay in reporting the results because they're keeping some precincts open a little bit longer. But once those results do come, this will be a key test. We know in 2018, the suburbs revolted against President Trump. Does that continue? Donald Trump narrowly carried the suburbs 4 years ago. It's one of the reasons he won North Carolina. Pretty close election there. So what are we going to watch? We're going to watch Mecklenburg County. This is absolutely essential for the Democrats. Does the African-American turnout in Charlotte go higher than that? You see the numbers. Joe Biden needs to exceed Hillary Clinton's raw vote numbers, but there's also a ton of growing suburbs around here. What is Donald Trump's number in the suburbs? That's one place to look. Another place to look, one of the fastest growing areas of America up here, Raleigh-Durham, the suburbs around here. So you bring up Wake County here. This is absolutely critical. You see 58 to 38, right? 20 points 4 years ago. How is Joe Biden doing here compared to Hillary Clinton? Or the flip side of that, how is Donald Trump doing there compared to Donald Trump? The fast-growing suburbs up here, they're more diverse, they're younger, they're more college-educated. They are the very voters who revolted against the Republican Party in 2018. We will get in these early states, North Carolina among them, some early clues, and then we'll just watch it out as we follow across the country.
Even in a traditionally red state like Kentucky, we'll get some early results coming in. Will we get a sense of how Biden is doing based on the early results we're seeing in a red state like Kentucky?
Yeah, so let's go back to Kentucky and let's pop out. Again, we have every expectation that Kentucky will stay red this year. Let's see. We're open to surprises, right? We're always open to surprises in elections. Remember, the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, is running for re-election in Kentucky. He has every expectation to win re-election in a relatively close race, but he expects to win. However, this is why we're here. It's election night. We get surprised sometimes. So what are we going to look for there? Number one, I just mentioned these smaller counties up here. Here's Cincinnati. Some of these northern Kentucky counties here, like Kenton, this is the Cincinnati suburbs, essentially. It's over the state line into Kentucky. But let's watch. You see it here, 59-33. If you move over, you come over here, Campbell County, 59-34. Is Joe Biden doing better just across the border here? If so, that tells you he's probably going to do better in southern Ohio as well, in the suburbs around Cincinnati. There's a big House district at play in the suburbs around Cincinnati as well. Plus, we'll see this. When you come into places like Fayette County, this is Lexington, Hillary Clinton won it, but look at the margin. 10-point margin there, 9-point margin if you round. So this will be absolutely critical to see. And again, it may not swing Kentucky, but is African-American turnout up? And in all the suburbs around here, a lot of suburbs around Lexington, a lot of suburbs around Louisville as well. Is Joe Biden overperforming Hillary Clinton? Or if you want to flip it, is President Trump underperforming, especially in the suburban areas? Kentucky will give us an early test, even though we do not think it'll be a swing state tonight.
And the polls close in Kentucky in an hour and 15 minutes, 6 p.m. Eastern, so we'll get some results. Then coming up, the big reveal of our first exit polls. We're going to get insight into how the night will potentially play out. We'll be back in a moment.
In New York.
President Trump is inside the White House right now as he and all of us await the results of the election. We are just minutes away from sharing the first information from our exit polls of voters with potential hints about the direction of the presidential race. We're also inside voting locations in the make-or-break battleground states. There's certainly a lot to watch for, especially in these early hours. David Axelrod, as we await some exit poll results, we were just talking about Bracken County in Kentucky, Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, as kind of early indicators of enthusiasm for President Trump or for Joe Biden. Where do you watch early on?
Well, I think you do choose counties that you think will give you some tea leaves. New Hanover County in North Carolina is a city that has not, a county that has not voted for a Democrat for decades, but it's become closer and closer. Trump won it by 4. It's around Wilmington. There's a burgeoning film industry. It's changing in character. It'll be interesting to see if Donald Trump can carry that county. And there are counties in every state like this that are right on the edge that he won, but not by that much. And if Joe Biden turns these counties, I think that gives you a sense of which way these elections are going to go.
You know, I think there's also a larger sense here, which is a question of win or lose. Is Donald Trump removing the Republican Party from places that are shaping the next century and this century, sort of the larger, more urban areas, areas with younger demographics, areas with more mixed and diverse populations? And we'll all be looking at that. But right now, we're all going to be looking at Florida, of course, because that reports early. Florida is always an issue. We know it's a tight race. And we know that if the president were to win Florida tonight, that his road to 270 gets easier and that Joe Biden's gets harder. Joe Biden doesn't need Florida. Donald Trump needs Florida to win this election. And so that's kind of my first choice. Then North Carolina.
The truth is he needs them all.
He needs them all,
that's right. He needs to run the table. If he loses Florida or North Carolina or Georgia or Arizona, this becomes very difficult. Florida being the biggest piece, but all of them are necessary if he's going to keep this thing in order so he can get over to Rick's place in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, unless he can pick up a Michigan or a Wisconsin. But you're right. I think, to me, Florida is the one you look at. It's the earliest one we're going to get some votes from. And the interesting one that's going to be different from 4 years ago is actually Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade may be a place where Donald Trump, I think he will do better than he did 4 years ago. And it'll be because of the Hispanic vote in Miami-Dade. I mean, we may pick up a congressional seat in Miami-Dade. I mean, there's
mostly Cuban, Venezuelan.
It's a Cuban, Venezuelan area, and that's an area where socialism. I mean, a lot of the Republican memes on conservative media were always talking about immigrants from all of these former socialist countries who are passionate. That's one of the reasons I think you're seeing. Oddly enough, that Trump is doing well among immigrants because immigrants who've had this experience with socialism are very, very concerned about what they're seeing in the Democratic Party.
And I think that's why trying to tar Biden is something that he's not has been such a big part of the strategy. He's not a socialist. But what's interesting is there are some troubling signs in Miami-Dade. But then in Broward County, you're seeing a massive outpour. And there's some constituencies that we don't talk about enough. The West Indians, the Jamaicans, they love Kamala Harris because her dad is from Jamaica. So they've got a big push there. You also have the formerly incarcerated folks who got their rights back. The Florida Rights Restoration Coalition got them their rights back. At first, they were kind of like, well, Biden was kind of a mass incarcerator. Then the Republicans came down so hard on them, saying, we don't want you to vote. So they pushed 700,000 people back toward the Democrats. Not very smart. And then lastly, the Puerto Ricans, because of they're the biggest climate refugees. They had to leave their island because of all the storms there. There's a big Democratic base there. So you got Puerto Ricans, West Indians, formerly incarcerated people, and then Broward County. So now you're going to have this thing. Miami-Dade versus Broward County is going to be a big deal.
I think an important point. There's no doubt that Miami-Dade is important, and it's important to Democrats, and he has to. Joe Biden has to perform at least close to what Hillary Clinton did. He doesn't have to do what she did. But the state's more diverse than it was 4 years ago. And Joe Biden is doing much better with white voters. And I think that's going to be a theme throughout this night.
That's the weirdest thing.
He is at, polling. Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton by 20 points in this country among white voters. Joe Biden has cut this to single digits.
One point.
In Florida, he's cut the lead in half. So you look at a county like Pinellas County, where St. Petersburg is, and that is a county that Barack Obama won in 2012, Trump won in 2016, largely white retirees. He's not doing as well, Trump, with seniors as he did 4 years ago.
It's a weird
so that's going to be another
it's like
bellwether.
A swap. It's like Biden's getting more white folks than Democrats usually get, and then Trump is getting more African-American men and Latinos. But the math of that may actually wind up favoring Biden.
Yes,
it's just more white folks.
60% of the state is white.
He's losing seniors by 20 points. And that may be part of the increase with white voters. That may be, a lot of that may be seniors, but you want to look at Broward County, where my dearly departed mother was a poll worker in Broward County, and you look at what's going to happen there, and I guarantee you, you're going to see a large shift among seniors.
We are just minutes away from our first exit poll results. We'll be back in a moment.
We're live here in Washington. Look at these pictures of the White House right now. This is a truly historic contest to win the White House and lead this nation. This is CNN's coverage of election night in America. We want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. Right now, Americans are making their choice between former Vice President Joe Biden and President Donald Trump. We're about to get our first look at what those voters care about most. The first exit poll information will be revealed just minutes from now. And we're only about an hour away from getting the first votes of this night. Stand by for that, as well as our first chance to make projections in this presidential race. That could happen in the 7 p.m. Eastern hour, when voting ends in Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. Those states have a total of 60 electoral votes. That's a little less than a fourth of the 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency. The first key race we'll be watching is Georgia, to see if that traditionally red state turns blue. Lots going on. Let's go back to Jim.
Well, if we're keeping tabs on the final hours of voting in key battleground states across the country, including Nevada, Michigan, Florida, we're also, of course, staying on top of what's going on behind the scenes of the campaigns. Let's go to Jeff Zeleny, covering Team Biden. Jeff, what are we learning about the former vice president's plans for this evening?
Well, Jake, we do know that Joe Biden is now heading home to his home in Wilmington after making a couple stops here after really a day-long stretch of campaigning. And there has been some question about what he plans to do this evening. He told reporters just a few moments ago that he will address the country tonight if the numbers are indicating something that he should. So if there is some type of a result, he will. But his campaign manager, Jen O'Malley Dillon, said earlier today that he definitively would address the country tonight, regardless of the outcome, regardless of where they are in the process. So you can see behind me here, they are setting up a stage here at the Chase Center in Wilmington. It's the exact place where Joe Biden accepted the Democratic nomination and walked out to that drive-in rally. So we could see him here this evening if he decides to address the crowd, but they're also keeping a close eye on what's happening in all of the states. They have a war room set up here in Wilmington, and they do believe that turnout was high today in several battleground states, but they also know, I'm told, that cuts both ways. Republicans, of course, were planning on voting in person, but Florida, of course, is one of the first battleground states we're going to see. There's pessimism I'm detecting, at least early pessimism, from key Biden advisors about the uphill lift there in the state of Florida. But votes are still being cast in Florida, so let's keep an eye on that. But of course, we'll see if we hear from Joe Biden tonight or perhaps in the wee hours of the morning. Jake?
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thanks so much. Now to Caitlin Collins, who's covering the Trump campaign. Caitlin, President Trump is breaking norms again by spending election night at the White House.
Yeah, he is. We haven't seen an incumbent president spend the night at the White House on election night in some time. But of course, with COVID restrictions happening here in Washington, D.C., that thwarted plans to have an event at the Trump Hotel nearby the White House, of course. And there are other questions being raised about the political activity, Jake, that's happening here at the White House. And of course, there's always political activity that surrounds a one-term president who is trying to become a two-term president. But the White House and the Trump campaign are now kind of converging forces, and there is a war room set up in the executive office building, of course, just a short walk from the Oval Office here at the White House. And a war room is political aides, campaign staffers who are watching television, monitoring social media, and of course, watching those returns as they are coming in and filling in their bosses who are then filling in President Trump. But the idea that it's happening here at the White House instead of at the campaign headquarters in Virginia is raising questions about whether or not it's blurring those lines between political activity and official government business. The Trump campaign is defending this by saying it is fully paid for by the campaign, not by taxpayers, even to the Wi-Fi and the computers. And they say no White House staff is involved in that, Jake. But it goes to show you how they've been blurring these lines for several years of the Trump administration. Things like the press secretary appearing on television as a campaign advisor, but of course, starting with this war room that we are seeing happening here on the grounds tonight.
All right, Caitlin Collins at the White House, thanks so much. Now we have the first exit poll results now. Let's go to David Chalian with that. David, what do you have?
Well, we're learning what sort of the top issue driving voters' choices today, Jake. This is nationally, and again, these are early numbers. They're likely to change as we get more and more information throughout the day from voters. But what was most important, the most important issue for your vote? 34% of voters in this election say the economy, followed by racial inequality, 21% said that, followed by coronavirus at 18% of voters who said that, crime and safety and healthcare policy a little further down. Take a look when we asked, what's more important to you to do right now, contain the coronavirus or rebuild the economy? Look at this, 52% say contain the coronavirus. That beats out the importance of the 42% that say rebuild the economy. And how about a measurement about how efforts are going in the U.S. to contain the coronavirus? Look at this, a split electorate on this today. 48% said U.S. efforts to contain the coronavirus are going well. 51%, a slim majority, say efforts to contain the virus are going badly. And finally, on this note, we asked, what do you think about wearing a mask in public? Is that more of a personal choice or a public health responsibility? Nearly 7 in 10 voters in this election tell us it is more of a public health responsibility. Only 30% of voters in this election say it is a personal choice. Jake?
All right, David Chalian, thanks so much for that fascinating results. Also, 48% of the country, Dana, saying that the handling of the pandemic is going well. That's a very high number considering that empirically, it is not going well. I mean, there is no health official who says it's going well at all.
And it is a different number than what we've been seeing in the polls up until now. But this is a poll, the exit poll is of those who have voted. And, you know, if I am in the Trump campaign, I am looking at that and saying, well, that's better than we thought it would be.
Yeah.
Because well, that's exactly right. That is
a
where
little bit higher.
It's better. It's better than
and because look, as bullish as the president and his aides have been in public about the coronavirus, that's not how they feel in private. They understand that this is a referendum on the president, and in large part because of the coronavirus. So, in that sense, maybe it is surprising, and I'm guessing if I'm going to contact people in the Trump campaign, they're probably going to say the same thing.
Yeah, but I mean, some of these other numbers were not that great for the president in terms of, he's at 42% in terms of people who think that the economy is the #1 issue. And that's what he's been trying to convince people that they should believe, that they should put the economy before managing or controlling the coronavirus. So that's 42%, that's the president and his base. Is that enough to win a presidential election, to be reelected? We don't know, but that is where the president's problems start. It is with this virus and the fact that Americans, even his supporters, 68% of Americans say wearing a mask is a public health priority. So that's the president's supporters and then some. So people who support the president want him to be a little bit more responsible on some of these.
But the question was in the question in the exit poll, and again, this is not complete. There are still people voting, et cetera. Which is a higher priority, containing the virus or rebuilding the economy? 52% said containing the virus. 48% said rebuilding the economy. Again, if I'm at the Trump campaign or if I'm at the White House, I think that's a lot of people saying rebuild the economy is more important than containing the virus, especially when every credible health expert says you need to contain the virus before you do rebuild the economy.
Exactly, and that's what Joe Biden's campaign has been all about. I mean, you know, you could probably start a drinking game to how many times he has said, you can't do one without the other. They are completely intertwined. That is a very different message than you've heard from the president. So, you know, we'll see what this means and you know, if this is kind of mimicking what one or the other is saying. The other thing I thought was really interesting in the priorities was racial inequality and how high that was.
Right.
In with the economy and in with coronavirus. Yeah. I mean, that has not, I don't remember seeing that. I mean, it obviously is because it's 2020 and we've seen the horrors this year and the way that people have protested because of it. But that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and again, we're trying to divine any sort of significance as to what these numbers mean when it's still incomplete and it's just preliminary data. But, I mean, if I am with the Trump campaign and I'm looking at these numbers, I'm thinking, this is an electorate that's a lot more susceptible to what we've been saying than what Joe Biden's been saying in general than we thought they would be.
Perhaps.
Not more so than Biden, but supporters, but more so than we thought they would be.
These numbers, to me, reflect the hyper-partisanship of the American electorate, which has only increased in the last 4 years. A lot of these issues are really determined by what shirt, what team these voters are putting the shirt on for. And so we're going to see that reflected in the numbers. So the president being at 40, you know, the president's view of the economy being a priority, being a little bit higher than his approval rating is fine, but I don't know that that tells you anything. It just continues to tell us that we have a really tightly split electorate this year.
All right. Food for thought. Wolf?
A lot of food for thought indeed. John King is here at the Magic Wall. Let's get some more on the political impact of the coronavirus pandemic that's still so powerful and so ugly here in the United States.
Right, so the early exit polls, as the panel just discussed, you know, we've all watched this political divide play out. Should you wear a mask? Should you not wear a mask? Is it okay to have big rallies on the campaign trail? Should you social distance on the campaign trail? We'll watch the votes and we'll see how it impacts. But we just know without a doubt. We know without a doubt, no matter where you live and no matter how you voted today, coronavirus is in your community. This is a map showing confirmed cases per 100,000 residents. The deeper the red is the deeper the pain, really. And just look up here. Now, there's no expectation that Joe Biden's going to carry North Dakota or South Dakota. Look how deep the red is up in those states up there. That is the fall surge right now. The fall surge, the average case count above 80,000 new infections a day. The fall surge now way in excess of the summer surge. But let's just walk through some of the battleground states. And remember battleground Wisconsin, right? It's the state the president won 4 years ago. Look at all this deep red right here. And not only has the president been saying we've rounded the corner, the vaccines will be here soon, saying things that just frankly, sorry, are not true about the state of the current fight against the coronavirus, to the point that Dr. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Deborah Birx, his own people have been critical of him in recent days. But the president trying to sell this in states that, Wisconsin especially, a hospitalization spike, a death record in the final week of the campaign. You just see this going up. And this is one of the questions of the campaign. The president has been open about this, criticizing the Democratic governor here, criticizing in another state he wants to win, Michigan, where you see not as deep red as Wisconsin, but still a lot of pain here. Early, Michigan was hit, especially early in the first wave, criticizing the Democratic governor there. Pull the map back, criticizing the Democratic governor in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The president has made this a rallying cry. And many say, why? Because all of those governors, whether it's Governor Wolf, Governor Whitmer, Governor Evers, they're popular if you look at the polls. However, what the president's people tell you is that this motivates his supporters, and that's what today is about. Will the Trump voters come out in massive numbers? Let's just look through some other battleground states. Again, one of the things we have seen in this campaign, Wolf, is that senior citizens, Donald Trump won voters 65 and over 4 years ago. All the polls show us late in the campaign Joe Biden actually leading with that constituency, which is critical everywhere. Very reliable voters, but absolutely essential in battleground Florida, out in Arizona, makes a difference in Pennsylvania. That's one of the older states as well. Just look at the pain. Look at the pain, especially up here. This is Trump country. This is Trump country. This is Georgia and Alabama. Across the Florida panhandle, these voters vote like the South. That is Trump country. That's where he needs to run it up, and look at the pain of the coronavirus there. What has the president been here? Very supportive of the Republican governor, a Trump-like governor, Ron DeSantis, who opened up early. There was a big controversy in his state. The governor here at war with some of the mayors in his state about it. And you just see this play out. Another state we'll watch tonight is Texas. Texas has been a fabulous case study throughout the coronavirus in that Governor Abbott, a Republican, among those early to reopen, among those resisting mask mandates, fights with the mayor of Houston. Wolf, you've spoken to him many times, I know, with the mayor of Austin, with the mayor of Dallas about restrictions. Then Governor Abbott at one point during the summer spike pulling back and saying we need to do more, things like masks. You just see all this pain. Where is it down here? This would be really fascinating to watch the vote down here. This part of the state down here, Harris County, Houston, incredibly hard hit. Fastest growing county in the state. Essentially, it's the landmass the size of Rhode Island. If it broke out, it would be the 25th largest state in the country, Harris County. Look at the pain there in deep red. A lot of Latino voters, a lot of suburban voters. And down here, absolutely key to the Democrats today, the Latino vote down in South Texas. This is where Beto O'Rourke has urged the Democrats to turn out the vote. We'll see how it happens, but just without a doubt, a place that has been punished in recent months and right now by the coronavirus. And again, Arizona has been another case study in that this is another Republican governor who took the cues from the president and reopened early. You see all the red, all the deep red here. How does it play out politically, Wolf? We don't know. And sometimes it seems even awful to have a conversation about this in the context of politics, but that has been just unavoidable throughout this year because of the collision between the coronavirus and the campaign. Presidential elections are about leadership. The president's leadership of the pandemic is on the ballot today. Joe Biden has a completely different approach. No matter where you live, you have lived this for 8+ months now. And the question is, how important is it when people vote? And again, I don't mean to minimize it. The coronavirus is everywhere. But in several of the big battleground states, whether we're talking Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Arizona, it's painful throughout the last 8 months. And in some of them with the summer surge, the fall surge, especially Wisconsin, for example, Iowa right now, very painful.
And we've gotten two very different perspectives from the two candidates as far as the coronavirus pandemic is concerned, what to do as far, if you're president of the United States. It's been a big issue.
It has been a big issue. And again, that's why these swing states will be so important. Let's just pull up the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for example. You have Governor Wolf, who has had restrictions in place. President Trump has campaigned against them. This is a state that, both campaigns think could switch the presidency. What does Joe Biden say? Not a national mask mandate, but national mask leadership. I will push governors to put mask mandates in place. I will be ready not to lock down the country. The president says Joe Biden wants to lock down the country. That's a lie. Joe Biden doesn't say that, but he does say we will surge in. Just in recent days, the president responding to a rally crowd saying that he would consider firing Dr. Fauci. Joe Biden says he would keep Dr. Fauci, asking voters to fire Donald Trump. That has been fascinating about this because you have, especially in these battleground states where you have had, remember the kidnapping plot against the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, in part because of her coronavirus restrictions and lockdowns. In Wisconsin as well, the governor has been at war with the state Supreme Court and the legislature on these issues. So this has been a political divide. It is a pandemic and a public health crisis that has been very political, and the votes today will reflect it's a choice.
Been a huge issue in this campaign.
Absolutely.
And will continue to be so. We're counting down to the first results of the night. In the next hour, we'll have more exit poll results soon, including a read on the candidates' qualities that mattered most to voters. It's all just ahead.
And welcome back to our election coverage. More exit poll results right now. David Chalian has that for us. David?
Anderson, we're taking a look at how much of the electorate are new voters, first-time voters. We asked that of folks. 13% of this year's electorate says that they are first-time voters. That was 10% 4 years ago, so that's a slight increase of first-time voters. Makes sense, I guess, with this explosive turnout we've been seeing. Take a look also. We asked folks, how is the voting process going in your state? So many people are voting differently than before. Look at this. 68% say it's very easy to vote, 25% somewhat easy, only 6% say it's somewhat or very difficult not to vote in their state. We also asked about people's confidence in the counting of the vote, and it's a supremely confident electorate. Voters in this election, 86% of them, if you add up the top two lines, are very or somewhat confident that their votes will be counted accurately. Only 8% said not very confident, and only 4% said not confident at all. We also asked voters, when did you make up your mind in this election? This is fascinating. Only 4% said in the last week. 3 times the size that group was 4 years ago. It was like 13% of the electorate that made up their mind in the last week. So few late deciders. 93% said they made up their mind before the last week, Anderson.
We're going to get some more from David Chalian in a minute. David Axelrod, Blair Borgia, what do you think? Blair?
Well, it's interesting to me that 93% of these people said, yes, I knew who I was going to vote for. That's why we've seen these sort of stable polls for the last month, it seems to me, not only nationally, where Biden's been ahead by 8 to 10 points, but also in state polls. We see that maybe the margins have closed a bit. Whether they're accurate or not is another question, but it seems to me that people haven't changed their minds. So you had the first presidential debate, which was when we saw the greatest movement away from Donald Trump. But after that, not much.
You know, I'm interested in these new voters and in voters who didn't participate in 2016. One of the theories of the Trump campaign is that they are going to energize a whole bunch of people who didn't participate in 2016. In polling, that hasn't been the case, and in the early vote, the data that's been accumulated, that hasn't been the case. That has leaned toward Biden, but that's a big thing, where these voters who didn't vote in 2016 or who voted for third-party candidates break in this election.
So that number for early voters, it could be just young people who are entering the race for the first time, who are now of legal age, or it could be people who just didn't vote the last time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure. Like, everybody's sitting there. Like, in a few hours, we're going to know the answer, right? Everybody's trying to read the tea leaves. Like, well, what does that mean? If they're confident in the voting process, does that make them more Biden people, or does it make it them more Trump people? I don't think we know.
Or American people.
Earlier, we also saw numbers on coronavirus and its impact on the electorate.
Yeah, that was an interesting number. I saw Rick smile across the table there because obviously, you know, the more people feel that the job is being well done, the better I would think the Trump people would feel that they might be predisposed to them, because we know that this has been a major issue for him, at least in polling. So that was an interesting number.
I just want to go back to David Chalian, and then we'll come back. David, you have more exit polls.
I do, Anderson. We're taking a look at candidate qualities. What were voters looking for in these candidates today when they cast their ballot in this election? 32% of voters in this election say they were looking for a strong leader. 24% good judgment. And down here, sort of the empathy factor, cares about people like me, 21%, 19% unite the country. Those bottom two are key Joe Biden issues, but it's the strong leader that seems to be the top candidate quality that people are looking for. And then this, I think, is fascinating, sort of how Trump voters in this election, were they out there voting for their candidate or against Joe Biden? 81% of Trump voters in this election tell us their vote was a vote that was affirmative. It was for Donald Trump. Only 14% were out there voting against Joe Biden. And this may be the most surprising number I've seen so far tonight about Biden voters. 64% of Biden voters in this early exit poll say they're out there voting for Joe Biden. Only 31% say their vote is motivated in opposition to Donald Trump. I thought that last number would have been much higher, Anderson.
Interesting. Did you think it would be higher, Van?
It's hard to know. Listen, I know a lot of people.
Because it's actually a big number. Yeah. I mean, 31% is a big percentage.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are in the Democratic Party are just tired of Donald Trump. The level of anxiety, the level of just kind of emotional fatigue from people. I mean, look, if you're a Muslim family, if you're from an immigrant community, if you feel vulnerable in any way, this has been a horrific 4 years. And so people, I think, would vote for, Kermit the Frog over Donald Trump at this point. So that's going to be a big part of it. But I think what you've seen is that Biden has actually won people over who were skeptical of him. I was one of the people who said, I don't think Biden's going to be able to make it. A lot of people, they've seen the consistency. What did he do? The first thing he did this morning, he went to Mass. Yeah, people forget he's a Catholic. He's a man of deep faith. His message today was the same as it was when he started the campaign. And his message that we need to come together, I think, has really broken through. So I think that number has is less now an anti-Trump party and more of a pro-Biden unity message party. I think you're going to see that tonight.
I would make the argument that most decent Americans, which I think the vast majority of Americans are, don't like to say they're voting against somebody.
That's right.
And so I think that number is generally, like Republicans, only 14% say they're voting against Biden. That's because they don't want to go in there and think, well, I'm voting against somebody. So the fact that 31% were willing to admit that they were voting against Donald Trump, that's a big number.
It says a lot about Trump. It just says
a lot about Trump.
It's just, rubbed this country raw.
Look,
people have just been rubbed raw by the disrespect, by the consistent, outlandish behavior, by the lying. So, yeah, I think it says a lot about Donald Trump.
I think this election's about two emotions, one in common with the parties and one different. Both both are playing to America's fears of what the other is going to do, is doing, or will do. So fear is a common. The difference is loving Donald Trump or hating Donald Trump. And which is fear is an equal motivator. But which one is the more powerful motivator? Being for someone or being passionate for them or being passionate against them?
Or change.
What about change? I think people loving the communities that have been disrespected by Donald Trump. I see a lot of love. In fact, one thing that's really interesting about this campaign, this politics of joy that's coming. As you see people standing in these long lines, the young people are bringing a different spirit. It's not an angry spirit from the young people. They were angry this summer. You're seeing this politics of joy. You're seeing groups, you know, the Vote Mob group and the Student Power Network and all these people, they're bringing music, they're bringing joy. Why? Because they are tired of being tired and they want something better, and it shows in their politics.
The first votes of the night are coming up at the top of the hour. We'll have more exit poll results soon. Much more ahead on this election night in America.
We're getting closer and closer to the first votes on this election night in America. Folks are still voting out there right now. I'm going to go over to David Shelley, and he has more insight on what's going on with our exit polls. We're getting some more information.
Yeah, about the economy specifically. Remember, in these early exit polls, which are polls of the entire electorate, whether you voted early before Election Day or on Election Day, take a look here. The economy is the #1 issue. 34% of voters in this election told us the economy is their most important issue. And I want to show you now a condition of the nation's economy. How does the country, how do these voters rate the economy? We're a pretty divided country on this. 13% excellent, but look at this. 35% say the economy is good, 32% say not so good, 19% poor, but it's that middle chunk there, the good and not so good, that's where the bulk of the voters are, and they're pretty evenly divided. We also asked about whether or not the pandemic has caused you financial hardship. 55% of voters in the election say, yes, the coronavirus pandemic has caused them financial hardship. 44% say no. And then the classic question, especially in a re-election year for a president, are you better off than you were 4 years ago financially? Is your family situation better off? 41% of voters say yes, better off than 4 years ago. 38%, roughly even group, says about the same. Only 20%, 2 in 10, say they are worse off than they were 4 years ago, Wolf.
Very interesting numbers indeed. John King, what do you make of these exit poll numbers?
Well, number one, it just shows you the pretty even divide in the country when you have 51-48 numbers like that throughout. It also is a reflection of how are you voting. Are you voting on how you feel right now and whether you're optimistic about the future, or are you voting about how you felt a couple months back when the coronavirus pandemic really hit? Let's just walk through some of the last months as we go through this. I just want to bring this up when we go back. If you go back to February, this was President Trump's calling card. The lighter the map, the lower the unemployment rate. And this is what the president thought he would be running for re-election on, a strong economy. Maybe you don't like me. Maybe you don't like my tweets. Country's doing well. We have single-digit 5% or less unemployment. That's what the president thought. And then the pandemic came along, and you come in here and you bring this up, and then you see March starts to get a little bit darker. Then look at April. You start to see the pain. Just look at this. Just the darker the colors here, the higher the unemployment rate. You see, look out at Nevada. That's 20% plus unemployment. Look at Michigan. Michigan, a key state to the President of the United States. Nevada, a Clinton state, but one the President hopes to flip tonight. You see all across here, not quite 20% plus, but in the teens, right? So that's when it started to hit, and the President's calculation about re-election changed dramatically. That's April. Then you look at May, it starts to get a little bit better, right? Remember, in May is the reopening. Some businesses reopen. And so as you follow it through, this is what the president hopes, that you forget April and May, and you start to come through here, and you see June, it gets even lighter. July, a little bit lighter still. August and September. And so the president's hope is that, you still see Nevada, tourism industry, still hurt very hard. Can the president make his case? In most of the rest of the country, the rate has come down. So the president is hoping. The stock market had a rough last week, but the president's hoping. You look at the stock market, you look at this. What has he been talking about the last several weeks on the campaign trail? What he calls the V. It's not a V. The economic recovery is uneven, but growth in the last quarter was quite significant. The president is hoping you look at the statistics now and say, okay, the spring was horrible, but things are getting better, and I trust this president. I don't want my taxes raised by Joe Biden. That is what the Trump campaign is hoping. What Biden tells you is, if you look at the economic impact that's lingering, where is it? Small businesses, disproportionately African-American and Latino-owned businesses. So that is the choice. The exit polls show an even divide. as we count the votes, it'll be fascinating to look at certain states with certain industries and see how it breaks down.
Hey, let's switch gears for a moment, John, while I have you. In about 25 minutes, we're going to start getting results, actual poll results, not exit poll results, from the eastern part of Kentucky, from Indiana right now. What are we going to be looking for?
Turnout, number one, and then how is President Trump doing? Let's just bring up the 2016 map and go through that. And we had a conversation very early when the results started to come in 2016 about these counties first in Kentucky. That's when we saw not only was Donald Trump doing well in Republican red areas here, but you come up here and you look up along the border, again, significant. We knew Donald Trump was going to carry Kentucky 4 years ago, but this is Ohio. Pennsylvania is just to the east. I just want to go through some of the things we saw here as this vote started to come out. 77% for Donald Trump, right? So you know, you come back to 2012, 62%. So we saw early evidence that Donald Trump was overperforming previous Republican nominees in these small counties. Not a lot of people, but and in Kentucky, maybe it doesn't matter because you're going to win Kentucky anyway. But then you come up here and you go and you find the same places in southern Ohio. You come up along the border here. Mitt Romney gets 62%. President Trump is getting 77%. So that's the first evidence we saw. Not only were Republicans coming out of the woodwork to vote for Donald Trump, but that he was overperforming in counties. If you want to go back 25, 30 years, these were Democratic counties. These were blue-collar Democratic counties down in southern Ohio. They have switched to Republicans before Trump, but he put it on steroids, if you will, and you watch it. And so that you look, you see it in Kentucky, it's a red state, you think no big deal. But then the same people live in southern Ohio, and then you come right along the river, and you come over here, and the same people live here in southern Pennsylvania. And so you start seeing things like Donald Trump getting 68, 69% if you round up there versus 10 points better than Mitt Romney in places that matter. So that's what we're going to look for. The other thing we'll look for in Kentucky, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but let me come back. As we first get the results out of Kentucky right now, let me clear the telestration here and come in. Again, we fully expect Donald Trump is going to carry Kentucky. But we want to look the suburbs. We want to look at Lexington. We want to look at Louisville. This is where we saw in 2018 the revolt against the President of the United States by suburban voters, particularly suburban women. So this is 2012 here. You come through 2016 here. Hillary Clinton carries this area. Look at 2020. This is where we're going to look. In Louisville, we'll turn the vote out here. And then if you come back and look at it, 54 to 40, right? 54 to 40. Hillary Clinton's going to win Louisville. The question is, the suburbs here, affluent suburbs around Louisville, these voters have turned against the president. So, again, we don't expect Kentucky to be in play tonight. But is Joe Biden doing better in places like Jefferson County, one of the early states to close when the votes come in? Is Donald Trump doing worse? Is Biden overperforming her, or is Trump underperforming himself, if you will? That will be one of the key tests as we move through demographic areas. Again, Kentucky, we don't expect to be much of a conversation tonight, but we do expect, Wolf, whether it's African-American turnout, the suburbs, or Trump performance in the rural areas up here, early clues.
And we know the suburbs going Democratic 2 years ago in 2018 helped the Democrats get the majority in the House of Representatives. Jake, back to you.
All right, well, thanks so much. And while John is going to be looking at Kentucky and Indiana, those congressional districts at 6 o'clock Eastern, at 7 o'clock Eastern, Abby, we have some big states. Georgia, which is a hot competition right now, and they also have 2 different Senate races, and some of the congressional districts in Florida as well.
Yeah, I mean, what is so important about those 2 states and several others that we'll get later in the night, North Carolina and Arizona, these are the states that President Trump has to hold on to. He has got to these are his equivalent of the blue wall tonight, is the Sun Belt states. He's got to figure out how to hold on to those states that have a long history in the red column, but they are really, really up for grabs tonight.
No, that's exactly right. And one of the issues that Donald Trump is having in those states, in particular Florida less so, but North Carolina and Georgia for sure, is the dynamic that John was just explaining about the suburbs and voters fleeing from Donald Trump in the suburbs is a problem for him in those 2 states because the suburbs have been expanding. They were already expanding 4 years ago, but they've been expanding even more. The demographics are changing rapidly in those 2 states, which is why the president and his team have been trying to get as many votes as they can in rural areas, in areas where they have no doubt that there are lots of Trump voters. The question is whether there are enough of them.
It's interesting you say that, less so about Florida, because I think you would agree that of all those Sun Belt states, we're talking about North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and Arizona. I would say that it is most likely that President Trump is able to hold on to Florida. We don't know what's going to happen. It's been very competitive, but the Biden people seem least confident about that one, and of the opinion most that that one is is really a coin toss.
Yeah, and you heard that reflected in Jeff Zelny's reporting just a little while ago. He's hearing the same kind of pessimism. And I was talking to Democrats all weekend about what's going on in South Florida, in particular, what's going on with their turnout operation. And they were honest. They were saying that they felt like they lost some time due to the virus, and they may not have had enough time to make it up. So it's a tough state for Joe Biden.
And we are closing in right now on the first actual results of the presidential race. That will come at the top of the next hour. That's when voting ends in the eastern parts of Kentucky and Indiana. Stay with us. Welcome back to CNN's Election Night coverage. We're closing in on 6 p.m. Eastern and the first actual votes of the 2020 presidential election. Polling places close soon in parts of Kentucky and Indiana, and we're standing by for that right now, though. Let us go to our battleground correspondent, Miguel Marquez, who's in Detroit, Michigan. Miguel, what are you learning about how soon the state will count the vote and release some of the numbers?
It sounds like it's going to be a lot faster than they were predicting earlier. The Secretary of State earlier on was saying it'd take about 3 days to do it. It looks like it's going to be sooner than that. We're in the TCF Center, the convention center here in Detroit. This is where they're counting. I mean, it's just hundreds and hundreds of poll workers counting the absentee votes here. It's been a record number of absentee votes that have come in. They've just announced that they've tabulated, and that bit in the center, that's all the tabulation machines. That's where the rubber meets the road here. That's where the votes are actually being counted. They have now tabulated 107,000 votes in this room alone. That is significant because if places like Detroit, the largest city in Michigan, and we have spoken to clerks all around the state today and to the Secretary of State, everything here is going as smooth as possible. If towns and cities like Detroit can report early, the expectation is that this idea of a red mirage early on where the state looks much more conservative at midnight, say tonight, that may not happen because once polls close, they're not only going to have day of votes, but these large sort of numbers of absentee votes that will start to come in very quickly from places like Detroit and Kent County, Grand Rapids, and Flint up in Genesee County. All that will start to come in fairly quickly, and you'll see sort of the vote come in across the state pretty equitably. And they expect it's not going to take 3 days. It's going to be much faster than that. Jake?
All right, Miguel Marquez in Detroit, Michigan. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's go to Pennsylvania now. And Sarah Murray, who's in Harrisburg, the capital of the Commonwealth. Sarah, you're learning about some election disinformation and other problems in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, that's right, Jake. Look, I think there was a lot of concern about how things were going to go today in Pennsylvania, but the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office is saying there were only 52 incidents that they heard of today. The vast majority of those were taken care of peacefully and were resolved. They're saying most of it had to do with electioneering near the polling sites. Some had to do with voters who were being recorded and they felt uncomfortable or were being harassed, and those situations are being investigated. But the District Attorney's Office in Philadelphia is saying the vast majority of the calls they were getting to their hotline had to do with misinformation that was circulating online. And that is what we are hearing generally in this state today. When you talk to these counties, they say that, you know, the voting has gone pretty smoothly. Things have been going pretty well. They haven't had a number of incidents, but we have seen a lot of things floating around online that have just not panned out. You know, it's a good reminder to all of us to be sure to check in on the things that you may see on Twitter. Not everything you're seeing is true.
All right, Sarah Murray, I'm into that. Thanks so much. Wolf?
All right, let's go over to Pamela Brown. Pamela, we just heard about Michigan, Pennsylvania. What are you hearing? You're taking a close look at the voting desk. How soon do you think we could start getting some results?
They're right, Wolf. Look, all eyes are on the battleground states, especially those 3 states you just mentioned. Let's take a closer look at these 3 states in red here. These are states that President Trump won in 2016, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. These 3 important states could keep us in suspense, perhaps past tonight. We're going to have to wait and see. And if you look at Wisconsin, they just started opening those more than 1.8 million pre-election votes cast. That is a 139% increase from 4 years ago. This will be a big test due to the sheer number of early votes and the fact that Wisconsin isn't accustomed to all of this. Now, let's show you Milwaukee County. Taking a closer look here, that's where the bulk of Democratic votes are in the state. The Milwaukee County clerk tells CNN they want to have the unofficial results ready between 3 and 6 in the morning. And then you go to Pennsylvania, where we just heard Sarah Murray. Let's look at the pre-election votes there. 2.4 million. They just started working on those today. And the state's largest city and Democratic stronghold of Philadelphia has a history of counting relatively slowly, but officials there are expressing confidence that they can get through 100,000 absentee ballots by 8 p.m. tonight. They think 50% of the total Philadelphia vote will be reported by 11 p.m. tonight. And all eyes are also on Michigan. More than 2.8 million pre-election votes have been cast there. That's up 161% from 2016. And the state just started counting today. And Detroit, where we just heard from Miguel Marquez, they're already tabulating 107,000 absentee ballots there. That is a large chunk of what they have received, and they should have more than 2/3 of the absentee vote tally by the time polls close at 8 p.m. Michigan Secretary of State tells CNN she expects the state's vote will be counted sooner than previously expected, so we could have a partial picture of Michigan tonight if everything goes as planned.
Well, that's pretty encouraging news, Pamela. Thank you very much. Let's go over to David Chalian right now. You're getting some more exit poll results. What's on the mind of voters when they were actually voting?
Yeah, we asked voters, are you more casting your ballot because of the position on issues that your candidate takes or a candidate's personal qualities? Take a look at this. 73%, an overwhelming majority, said it's the candidate's position on the issues that was most important to their presidential vote. So let's dig into some of those issues. On Obamacare, should the Supreme Court overturn Obamacare? 53% say keep it as is. That's a majority. Only 42% say overturn it. On the issue of Supreme Court appointments, how important is Supreme Court appointments as a factor in your vote? 61% of the electorate says it's an important factor. 37% says it is not. Climate change. We asked voters in this election, is it a serious problem? 2/3 of voters say yes. 66% say climate change is a serious problem. 31% say no. And then we asked the view of the federal government. And this gets you sort of at the mood of the country right now. Look at this. A majority here, if you add these up, that's 58% are either dissatisfied or angry. That's their view of the federal government, Anderson.
All right, David Chalian, fascinating. We'll come back to David with more. How are you feeling about the exit polls?
I think the exit polls are great.
Yeah. You like what you see?
I like what, I mean, just that last graphic. I mean, it's
the climate change thing that.
Well, no, 60% of the public saying they're dissatisfied. You know, the government is not.
53%
Yeah, you know what?
like Obamacare.
The president of the United States.
Yeah, but 42% still want to get rid of it. Look,
Rick, let me ask you a question. If you're the president of the United States, you're the head of everything, right? You're in charge. And 60% of the country, or whatever it is, says they're dissatisfied with the federal government. You know, this is an interesting thing because Donald Trump has tried to be the leader of the resistance to the federal government at the same time that he is the president. And the question is, can you pull that off?
Well, the answer is yes, because Donald Trump has experienced throughout the course of his presidency the deep state, Washington, attacking him.
But he's the president.
I understand.
Well, he's attacking everybody at the same time. So it's like
whether it's leaks or disinformation or other things, or not willing to go along with his directives. There's been a battle in Washington, D.C. between the president and the bureaucracy, and I think that's playing out here. Look, overall, these numbers on these exit polls is an electorate that, in my mind, does not says we're going to be here a long night.
It could be.
That's my prediction. I think we're going to be here a long night, or maybe a few
I have to say 2-1 on climate change. Yeah. I mean, there are mixed results
Supreme Court.
This is it's good parlor talk.
So some of the questions can be interpreted. I mean, saying the Supreme Court
could go either
way. Could go either way. Like, they don't like the Supreme Court nominations, and therefore it weighs into them, or they do.
I guess let me just say this. Maybe that's not the right thing. I'm looking at this, and I don't see a Democratic landslide on those exit polls. And I know that's a lot of people think that Joe Biden could get 400 electoral votes. I don't see that from this electorate based on these exit polls.
At 5:52, we'll
at 5:52, stamp it.
I want to see this written down.
Exit polls do not tell us. We've all had a lot of experience with this. Exit polls do not tell us what's going to happen in this election.
Agreed.
They've had to do exit polls differently this year because of the pandemic.
So what in this next hour for states starting to see votes? What should we look for?
Florida.
No, just
Georgia.
No, Indiana,
Georgia, Kentucky.
Kentucky.
I think John spoke about this. I think you look for areas that have sort of cultural kinship to states that, like Ohio, for example.
Covington
and
County.
so you want to do that.
And also by comparing to enthusiasm about the president in some areas that he did very well in Kentucky.
Is he underrunning his totals from?
You also want to look at
ago.
how Mitch McConnell's doing versus Donald Trump. I mean, as for me as a Republican, I'm equally concerned about holding the United States Senate and making sure that that if whatever happens at the top of the ticket, we at least have a check on Joe Biden if Joe Biden is going to be the president. So looking at how McConnell runs versus Trump and whether, senators are running better than Trump would be an encouraging sign to me.
You're going to get Indiana too.
Yeah, Indiana doesn't have a Senate race this time.
No, but we'll be seeing what's going on in Indiana and what the margins.
They have a
look
governor's
like.
race.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things about the polling, and thank God, having consumed thousands of them, we're past that now. We can actually let people speak. But it's been interesting that, Donald Trump may win the state of Ohio tonight, but he won it fairly handily last time. He may win the state of Iowa tonight, but he won it pretty handily last time. And that's been pretty uniform across the country. So what implications are there for states that are closer? And I think that's, one of the things that we need to watch.
Also, I think the issue that is motivating people, at least on the Democratic side, is none of those issues. It's, are we going to have a democracy? I mean, people feel an existential threat from the way that Donald Trump has conducted himself. He seems to be running against the election. Biden is running in the election. It seems that Trump is running against the election. And so I think there's an existential threat and dread that people might say, listen, I'm doing fine on the economy. The Supreme Court's important to me. And you still won't get to why they're going to stand for 4 hours to vote against Donald Trump. So I just think that, we are in a completely different situation psychologically and emotionally and spiritually for the country. Some of these questions don't get to that.
What was interesting to me is, of course, the numbers on the economy, because when you ask people if they were better off, 41%, again, in this exit poll, which we don't see as a predictor of anything, said they're better off.
Yeah, but that's
58% said the same or
but
worse.
that's half of Silicon Valley, and most of those people are against Trump. So you got billionaires that are better off, and they want Trump out.
We're going to get the first votes of the night very soon. Election Night in America continues right after this.
We want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the CNN Election Center. We're just minutes away from the first results as voters decide whether to put Joe Biden in the White House or give President Trump a second term. The first big round of poll closings happened right at the top of the next hour, 7 p.m. Eastern. That's when voting ends in Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. Some polling places in the Eastern time zone in Indiana and Kentucky, they are closing right now, and we expect early results from those 2 states at any moment. A total of 60 electoral votes are on the line in the next hour. Remember, 270 are needed to win the White House. Georgia's 16 electoral votes could be pivotal as the once reliably red state is now a competitive battleground. Jake, we're in uncharted territory with a record-breaking number of voters already having cast their early ballots in person or by mail.
And many more are voting right this minute. We've been seeing pretty steady streams of people showing up at some of the polling locations that we're monitoring in battlegrounds, including Arizona and Iowa and Michigan, as well as in Georgia, where voting is in its final hour. Our correspondents are getting new information about the campaign strategies in these closing hours. Let's go to Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, what is Team Biden doing right now?
Well, Jake, throughout the day, the turnout reports have really been extraordinary, and the Biden campaign has been watching these with great interest. Of course, the Trump campaign has been as well, because many Republicans have said they intended to vote in person today. But it is those high turnout numbers that is giving some sense of optimism to the Biden campaign, but it is also doing this. I am told that at this hour, the Biden campaign is working to get more votes out, more of their supporters to the polls in South Florida, in Jacksonville, in the St. Pete, Tampa area. They do believe that Florida is a bit of a challenge
challenge for them at this point. Now, this started shortly after the workday, and Democrats have historically voted more at the end of the workday between the 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. hour. Who knows if that holds during this moment of the pandemic with so much early voting and a difference in work schedules, but they are working to get the last vote out in these areas. No question, the Biden campaign is still feeling optimistic, but they do believe these southern states of Florida, of Georgia, North Carolina, more difficult than that blue wall of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. They are more optimistic about the North than the South at this point, but polls still open and they're still working, Jake.
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thanks so much. Now let's go to Caitlin Collins. She's at the White House. Caitlin, how does the Trump campaign see this night playing out?
Well, it depends on really who you ask. Publicly, the press secretary, who is moonlighting as a Trump 2020 campaign advisor, said today they believed it could be a landslide. Yesterday, the president predicted potentially a blowout, but internally, they are obviously not that confident. And when you talk to people about what they're seeing in the numbers, what they're looking for, of course, they're not even confident that the president is going to win yet. They are waiting to see what happens in these critical states that Jeff was just pointing out. So certainly not as confident there. Some mixed messages on what exactly they're expecting. But we did just hear from the White House Communications Director, Jake, who said the president is going to be watching these returns come in the East Wing with senior staffers from his campaign, his family there as well. They said they are expecting delays in those results coming out of Pennsylvania as they are counting the mail-in ballots and tabulating those. One thing that does seem certain, Jake, is that we could hear from the president tonight. They said it's not clear what form exactly we're going to hear from him in, or of course when that could come, but the White House says they do expect us to see the president at some point tonight.
All right, Caitlin Collins with the White House. Thanks so much. Let's go to David Chalian now. He has some more information from these exit polls. David, what are you seeing?
Jake, I just want to stress these exit polls are going to change. These are early exit polls, but they are representative of the electorate no matter how you voted. If you voted early, in person, if you voted by mail and absentee, or if you voted on Election Day today. And as we get more and more surveys in, these numbers will shift. These are early preliminary exit polls, but it does represent everyone voting no matter how they voted. Let's look at sort of some key demographics in the electorate, the makeup of the electorate. 53%, according to these early exit polls, are female voters, 47% male. That is precisely what it was 4 years ago. So you don't see a big change in the share of the electorate for either gender there. Take a look at the racial breakdown. 65% of the electorate in this preliminary exit poll results is white. 4 years ago, it was 71% white in the electorate. So we're seeing a pretty significant drop in the share of the white vote as a part of the overall electorate in these numbers. 13% Latino, 12% black, 6% something else, 3% Asian. Take a look at the age breakdown inside this early exit poll. 16% of the electorate, 18 to 29-year-olds. That's exactly what it was 4 years ago. 30 to 44, 23. 38% of the electorate, 45 to 64 years old, and 23% of the electorate, 65 and older. That's a slight tick up in terms of the share that seniors make up in the electorate. 4 years ago, it was 20%. We also seem to be a bit more college educated as an electorate today. Take a look. 45% say they are college graduates in the electorate today. 55% say no. 4 years ago, we saw it was 40% who said they were college graduates. So a few more college graduates in the electorate. And then party ID, just how we split by party, 38% Democrat, 35% Republican, and 28% of the voters in this 2020 campaign refer to themselves as independent. Jake, Dana, Abby?
All right, David, thanks so much. Okay, so when we talk about reading the tea leaves, again, here I'm seeing an electorate based on these early exit poll results, not definitive, that suggest an electorate that one could say is more amenable to the Biden message. It is a more female electorate. It is a less white electorate.
More college
it
educated.
has more older voters, and seniors are in favor of Biden, according to polls, and a more college educated. Again, early results, but just looking at what I'm seeing here, that's what I'm taking away.
Yes, I think that is exactly what to take away on all of this. I think one of the most interesting things is the fact that it's less white. This country is less white, but it's not the Republican Party. And this is why broadly, before Trump came on the scene, you saw the Republican Party nationally trying so hard to expand beyond a white base. And then came Donald Trump. and everything that came with the Trump campaign and the Trump presidency. And it's been a lot harder for him to reach out beyond and in order to keep the Republican Party from being a really shrinking party. And the question is whether or not this shows us that the demographics, Abby, are really shifting in a pretty rapid way.
And it'll matter in those Sunbelt states that we were just talking about. But, you know, interestingly, I was talking to a Republican and we were talking about the gender gap issues and even issues of race. This Republican said the most important thing is the college, non-college split. That with women, it's about whether you're college educated versus not college educated. That's going to tell us a lot more about whether people are amenable to Donald Trump's message versus Joe Biden's. And this number, even a small ticking down of the non-college educated share of this electorate, is something that could matter for President Trump. That is his stronghold. He does have to hold on to it. He has to turn those people out. And if he's not able to do that in the places that it matters, we'll see it tonight in the results that come in some of these key states.
It's such an important point because 4 years ago, Donald Trump won Michigan, he won Wisconsin, he won Pennsylvania on the margins. He didn't win by that much.
77,000 votes in 3 states.
That's exactly right. And so when you're looking at the demographic shift, even if it's just a little bit on some of the issues and some of the sectors that matter the most to him, that could make a difference.
It's about the turnout of those people, and it's also just about the margins. As you note, one of the things that's interesting is, like, for instance, Pennsylvania, which I am obsessed with, of course, because I'm from there, 47% of the electorate is non-college educated whites. Trump won them by 32 percentage points in 2016. According to polls, he's only winning them by somewhere between 15 and 20 percentage points. If that holds in the vote today, that will be good for Biden. But again, polls are not facts, polls are not votes. Wolf?
That's absolutely right, Jake. You know, John King, let's take a look now at the path to the all-important 270 electoral college votes you need to be elected president.
And that's why the conversation we're following is so important. What is the electorate? What is the composition of the electorate in which states? That'll take us a long way there. But Joe Biden's trying to do 2 things tonight. He's trying to get back what President Trump took away, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, from the Democrats. They had not gone red since 1992. They had been in Democratic hands since 1992. So Joe Biden is trying to get back the blue wall, all right? He's trying to hold all the Clinton states. That would be Colorado. That would be, oh, come on, you have to change for me. There you go. That would be Nevada. That would be Minnesota. That would be New Hampshire. All right, so there you go. You get the Clinton states back. That gets you to 278 right there. If you can just get Pennsylvania, I say just get. That's not easy. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. You get those back, you're the next president of the United States. That's the first thing he's trying to do. Get the Clinton states back. Don't lose any of them. And then get back those 3. That's Joe Biden's goal. Then he's trying to do what Abby and Dan and Jake were talking about. If you get the diversity of the electorate. Democrats have said for some time, Georgia eventually will be our state. We're growing in the suburbs. African Americans, Latinos. Arizona will eventually be our state. The Democratic dreams of the last decade. Texas will eventually be our state. Has Trump put that evolution on steroids? If you look at the demographics, you'd say 2 years from now, 4 years from now, some of those states maybe 6 years from now. But has Trump put the electorate, put that transformation, especially because of the suburbs, and if you get the increased African American and Latino turnout? Can Joe Biden do things like that in the North Carolina suburbs? African Americans plus the suburbs plus young people. In Florida, African Americans, Latinos, the suburbs, and the I-4 corridor. Can he do something like that? He's within reach. Can he do something like that? He's within reach. This is what the Democrats dream of tonight. They do have the opportunity. Opportunity is one thing. Execution and finishing is something else. But that is Joe Biden's path. And then even then, so you're leaving Georgia.
What about Trump?
I left Georgia on the table. So let's go back to the president's map for Trump. You come back, if you're the president of the United States, if you're an incumbent, you start with this, and we know President Trump is obsessed with this. To this day, gives copies of this map when people visit him, when he talks about the campaign, when he's traveling. This is what he talks about. If you're Trump, you've seen him the last few days spending a ton of time here, here, and here. He loves this map because it made him president. That's not a criticism. That's a compliment. This is how he won the presidency 4 years ago. Yes. And so his point is defend it. Here's the question. We know his approval ratings in the mid-40s. We know the coronavirus pandemic is all across the country. He's likely to lose something. The question is, how much can he afford to lose? If you think about it, late in the campaign, the Biden lead in Michigan was pretty steady and pretty consistent. Doesn't mean that's how it's going to go tonight. Hillary Clinton had a narrow lead in Michigan at the end of the last campaign. Joe Biden's was about twice that. But so Donald Trump has to prepare to lose Michigan. He has to be prepared that maybe he loses Wisconsin. Again, they're trying to surge voters out today. It's not outside the realm of possibility. But if you're in the Trump campaign in the final days, you have to be prepared that those two get away. You also have to be prepared that maybe you're going to lose this. Joe Biden is favored to win in Maine quite handily. Maine allocates its electoral college votes by congressional district. The president has to be prepared to lose that one. He also has to be prepared to lose this one. Doesn't mean he will. But that's the expectation inside the Trump campaign based on everything they've looked at in the final week. So this is what it comes down to here. And so then what happens? Donald Trump would still be at 278 if he can hold this, if he can hold Pennsylvania. Now, 278 if he can hold Pennsylvania, he still has to hold North Carolina, he has to hold Florida, he has to hold Georgia, and he has to hold Arizona. The president is on defense on this map. The best thing about it is, Wolf, we're just moments away from actually getting to count some votes.
We're going to get results fairly soon in some of these states. We'll be watching very, very closely. We're getting closer and closer to a first chance to make projections in the presidential race at the top of the hour. All right, we got our first key race alert of the night in the state of Indiana, where a lot of the polls closed at the top of the hour. Take a look at this very, very early. But Donald Trump is ahead of Joe Biden, 68.3% to 29.7%. He's up by more than 3,000 votes, but it's very, very early in Indiana. We're going to get results, John, and from Kentucky fairly soon as well. What are you going to be looking for?
Well, it's always fun to get the first votes of the night. So you see Indiana red on the map. If it ends that way, nobody would be surprised, right? It's a reliably Republican state. Let's pull it out. Let's just look at what we're looking at. It's always fun to get the first votes. Greene County gets that distinction in the United States of America this year. 68.3 for the president, 29.7, about half of the vote in, according to that. Again, this is one county, so this is not instructive, but one of the things we're going to do throughout the night, that's 2020, is go back. So we'll see when this vote comes in. Donald Trump got 75% if you round it up 4 years ago. Sometimes we look at the math, too, 10,000 votes, 10,000 plus votes. So you come to 2020 and you look, we're not done counting yet, right? But if that's half and he's at 5, that's roughly equal. That's the one thing you're going to watch. Is the incumbent president of the United States matching, or is he exceeding or underperforming from 2016? It's one thing we're going to look at. This is very early on. It's one county. Nobody should be doing anything, getting stressed or happy at home. We're just getting started. But Indiana is the first thing to come in. Wolf, we all have our little quirks about election nights. This is Greene County. You come over here, Vigo County. No votes in Vigo County yet. You can go all the way back to 1956. This county has always gotten it right. It's one of the places we'll watch tonight. In Vigo County in 2016, voted for Donald Trump. Vigo County in 2012, voted for Barack Obama, even though Indiana was going back to the Republicans. So Vigo County is just one of my quirks on election night. Goes all the way back 1956. They've had it right. So let's come back to 2020, though, because here we are in the here and now. Just one county here right now, but Indiana, reliably red. Mike Pence's home state. Nobody expects Indiana to go blue tonight, but it will teach us some things. Number one, you come up here to Lake County, Gary, Indiana, African-American turnout there. Are African-Americans in a state they even know Joe Biden is likely to lose? Are they turning out? Right? You want to watch that. You want to watch that everywhere. Is he turning out his dynamic? One other thing you want to pull out here, and I'm going to break the country down by counties, and then come in here. You break the entire country down by county, and you come up through here. There we go. I'm in the wrong place. I'll find them right here for you. You come up here and you find these suburban counties. One of the things we're going to look at tonight, and I'll pull out the map to come to the entire country, is you see the gray areas. These are communities known as suburbs, the suburban communities identified on this map across. One of the things you want to look at, if you go back to 2016 and look, you see a lot of red. Donald Trump narrowly won the suburbs back in 2016. And you see there are a number of places in Indiana, the state we're talking about, in getting our first votes, especially around Indianapolis here. This is one thing we're going to study all across the country tonight. So even though Indiana is likely to go red in the end, it will tell us, is Donald Trump in the suburbs, places like Hendricks County, 64% 4 years ago. There are no votes there yet. What does he get this time? This is one of the things we're going to watch throughout the night, not just in Indiana. You mentioned Kentucky. Kentucky comes up soon. I mentioned this earlier, but the Lexington suburbs in here. This is the Lexington covers.
We got some numbers just coming in.
Well, then here we go. Let's pop and see them. We'll switch over to 2020. Let's come out of this here and close this up. And you see your first votes right here. South of Lexington, north of Bowling Green, Casey County, it's 0.4% of the population of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. But look at that, 85.8%. If you go back in time, Donald Trump got 85% there then. So in these very early results, he's essentially matching what he did both in this county here in Kentucky, that county there in Indiana. The president matching at the moment. Is that significant? We don't know. 2 counties We got a long way to go.
Go back to Indiana for a moment, John, because there's a county, a second county. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
In the northern part of the state. It's a relatively small county.
Another small county, 35th. Well, it's in the top third, right at the bottom of the top third. 35th of 92 counties, 70%, 68%. If you look at it there again, we're going to do this all night long. You go back 71% then. We haven't counted the votes yet. Again, we're early. People at home will think we're a little nuts for doing this, but that's what we're going to do all night long to try to figure out, is the president, where is he compared to 2016? Overperforming, underperforming, about the same. And that's how we'll know, is the map shifting? Even in, this is one of the things to watch at. When you have a president who lost the popular vote last time, when you have a president whose approval rating is 45%, when you have a president who's managing, Democrats would say mismanaging, the pandemic in the country right now, even in places he wins, is he underperforming? Is he getting fewer votes? Or even are red counties and red towns and red cities and red states closer in 2020 than they were in 2016? That'll be one of the things we watch tonight. And again, Indiana and Kentucky will be early examples. We expect Donald Trump to win Indiana and to win Kentucky. The question is, do we get clues about the rest of the country by tighter margins, by the president underperforming in states that he won in a walk 4 years ago?
We'll watch those states. We'll watch all the states. That's coming up. We're in the final run-up to the first big round of poll closings at 7 p.m. Eastern, and our first chance to make projections. We'll be back in a moment. All right, we got another key race alert. Votes are actually coming in both Indiana and Kentucky. In Indiana, both very, very early, but Trump has a very significant lead so far, leading by almost 12,000 votes over Biden in Indiana right now, 66.7% to 31.4% for Biden, fully expected in Kentucky. Similarly, he's up by 15,000 plus votes, 65.7% to 32.7%. 2% of the vote in Kentucky is in Kentucky. In Indiana, the votes are coming in. John came very, very early, but totally expected in these two red states.
They are, Wolf. Come on over. We get to count votes, which is fun. This is Kentucky. You see some counties coming in, and for the Democrats, the first time tonight, you see some blue. Is it significant? We don't know yet. It's early, but we'll take a look at it. This is Anderson County, south of Frankfort. A little suburban area here. It gets more rural as you go south. Joe Biden, again, 20% of the vote in, 18% there. So don't jump to conclusions. And this is going to happen all night. We ask for your patience, right? This is an early vote count, which is just coming in. Other states are going to release, they're going to count the mail-in votes first or the absentee votes first. Other states are going to flip that and do those last. So we're going to bounce around a little bit throughout the night, and we ask your patience. But you look at this, Anderson County, Kentucky, the state we fully expect will be Donald Trump red at the end of the night. Joe Biden up. If you go back to 2016, this is a county Donald Trump carried by a huge margin, 50 points essentially there 4 years ago. So it's a place you watch, right? You're looking to see. Again, the results here are early. We have no idea. This could be one Democratic precinct. This could be early votes. We got a long way to go. But it's one of the things we will watch when we see aberrations on the map. When you see blue, where there has been traditionally been red, and you see red where there's traditionally been blue, you go and you take a look and you study. You look at it on the map. We talk to our reporters. So something to watch, again, because it's one of the suburban counties south of Frankfort. We know the suburbs did turn on Donald Trump in 2018. So we'll watch that, see if it stays blue, see what the margins are in the end, see if it is a clue to what might come in other states as well. You see right now statewide in Kentucky right now, Donald Trump opening 2% in, but opening a lead. Again, you see 67% there just for fun. 62% was his margin, his lead back in 2016. We'll keep an eye on that. Remember, Senate race in Kentucky as well. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on the ballot, expected to win, but sometimes we get surprised on election night. We'll watch him. You look up at Indiana right now. There's no blue on the map yet here. You're coming up here in the top corner. You know, again, these are tiny, tiny counties, 0.5% of the population. But again, this is part of the key to Donald Trump's victory in 2016. Not so much in Indiana, a reliably red state. His vice president is from there. But this is something you just want to watch throughout the night. Are the margins roughly the same, better or worse than 4 years ago? Is the president overperforming, underperforming, or breaking about even with 2016? And another thing to watch, and again, we're early here, about half the vote we think, is sometimes this numbers matter. We tend to focus on the percentages, right? How big is somebody winning? In a close election, the math can matter. Just the raw math in the context of that's 2020. You look at 2016. So we got twice that many votes in this county. So let's see when they finish counting. Is turnout about the same? Is turnout down? Is the Trump vote down? More importantly, maybe we'll see, is Joe Biden doing better than that? Is that a clue that Joe Biden is running better in these small rural counties? Is the president breaking even? Those are the dynamics, Wolf, we track throughout the night. And again, we're very early on right now. Come back to 2020. So we're just now essentially looking at the first early votes, taking note, comparing them to 2016 to see if they give us any clues as we go forward. and you, again, just come out a little wider so you can see it. 2 states right now, red at the moment, still counting to do. We expect them to be red at the end, but they still might teach us something.
We're told that so far, at least about half of the vote in Kentucky is early vote coming in. The other half is today vote.
Right,
in Indiana, it's mostly all early. It's almost all early in Indiana.
Right, so you see that, and that'll be key, especially as we move on to other states where we expect either more battleground states.
Tell our viewers why that's important.
Well, if you're getting early votes, we know, not in every state, but in most states, the early votes, the people who voted by mail or showed up and voted early in person in early voting, disproportionately, especially the mail-in early ballots, were Democratic. If you look at the data is analyzed. So you're going to see some places that are blue that aren't normally blue. Sometimes that's just what it is. They counted those votes first. Once the polls close, they release those numbers. And then as Election Day comes in, you know, the traditional, it evens itself out. It catches up and it reflects whatever the community is. So we're going to go through this in every state. In a place that's holding the mail-in ballots and holding some of the early vote ballots, you get Election Day vote first. And so did the president turn out his votes? Well, you may see places that are traditionally blue that are red for deep into the night tonight because they haven't counted the mail-in ballots yet. And we're just going to have to stay with us. We have a great team of people looking at all this. We'll explain it transparently as we go through the night. And it's going to be a little bit different because this year is very different.
Go back to Indiana for a moment.
Sure.
I want to see if any more votes came in. Not really, no. But Trump obviously has a very, very significant lead with less than 1% of the estimated vote in.
1%. It's Mike Pence's home state, number one. It's been in the national news a lot because, remember, Amy Coney Barrett, the new justice on the Supreme Court, was on Notre Dame Law School beforehand. So Indiana gets a lot of national attention because it has a vice president at the moment and because, of course, the Supreme Court justice, she's not from there originally, but she spent a great deal of time in Indiana because of her work at the Notre Dame Law School. And again, this is a reliably red state. We have no expectation it's going to be anything but it has some big suburbs around Indianapolis, some suburbs around Bloomington, African-American vote up in Gary. There are things to learn, even from states that you're pretty sure how they're going to end up, how they're going to land at the end of the night. You still can learn things along the way.
Gary, Indiana, not too far from Chicago. We'll see what's going on up there. All right, John.
You might remember back in the 2008 primaries, we were having conversations about the Obama-Clinton race. I got a few of these from that.
I remember that well. All right, guys, let's go back to Jay.
All right, thanks, Wolf. Now let's go to 2 more of the battleground states that are so important in this election. First, let's go to the Tar Heel state, North Carolina. Diane Gallagher is in Raleigh, and Diane, state election officials say results are going to be delayed a little.
Yeah, Jake, I know everybody was waiting for this swing state, this battleground state, to report at 7:30 p.m., but because the state of North Carolina sees to it that each precinct has the exact same amount of time open, there were some issues opening in certain counties in the state. They extended the time. One of those in Sampson County, they're extending until 8:15 p.m. And so because North Carolina holds all of its statewide results until the last poll closes, that means we will not be getting any of those early vote totals until 8:15 p.m. at the earliest. I will tell you, they're in another meeting right now. I've been following along while listening to you guys. It does not appear at this point that it's going to extend past 8:15, but again, that could all change. Now, those early vote totals are interesting because I want you to take a look behind me. This is what we've had going on almost all day, this slow, steady pace, but that's because 4.6 million early votes were cast in the state of North Carolina. More than 95% of that total 2016 turnout and more than 62% of all registered voters. Now, they had decent turnout amongst both Democrats and Republicans in this state, and it is tight here. Polling has shown that former Vice President Joe Biden is just a little bit ahead in that polling, but really it has been neck and neck. And they're also here in this state focused on a very close Senate race, Jake, something that everybody here is waiting to get at, again, 8:15, those numbers.
All right, Diane Gallagher in Raleigh, North Carolina. Let's go to Wisconsin. On to Wisconsin, where favorite son Bill Weir is in the state capital, Madison. Bill, the National Guard is now playing a role in the election in the Badger State?
Yes, Jake. It otherwise pretty smooth as butter here in the Dairyland, but the one hitch is out of Gamey County. It's near Green Bay. It's Appleton, Wisconsin. Big Republican stronghold. Due to a printing error, they thought they had about 13,500 ballots that would have to be painstakingly hand-transferred onto a clean ballot. Otherwise, it would throw off the counting machines. The problem is not as bad as they thought. They actually went to the Wisconsin Supreme Court for guidance, and they decided, like, handle it yourselves. Hire more people. They brought in 20 National Guardsmen. who are helping transfer things. But it doesn't sound like as many of the ballots were affected as they originally feared. But still, Appleton, which is a key return area there, probably won't be in until tomorrow morning at the earliest. Meanwhile, here in Madison, which was kind of like a blueberry in a bowl of tomato soup 4 years ago, it will be bright blue tonight. Things are going so smoothly here. The count should be in. And as one veteran, a poll worker here told me, Jake, the reason it's going so well here is that they finally figured out how to use the counting machine. She said, it's like a baby boy. If you don't know your way around it, it'll pee all over you. Just one more example of why Wisconsin, I think, is really the most charming of all the states.
All right. All right, I'll leave that one where it is. I appreciate it. Bill Weir, thanks so much. David Chalian is breaking down more of the exit polls. David, what are you learning?
Jake, we're taking a little look at the profile of Biden voters and Trump voters, but I just want to remind everyone, these preliminary exit polls are representative of the electorate, no matter how you voted. If you voted early, in person, if you voted absentee, by mail, if you voted today on Election Day, in person, all of that is included in this exit poll, and these are preliminary numbers that are likely to change as we get more surveys in throughout the night. Take a look here. You can see among Trump voters, among those voters that voted for Donald Trump, 82% said the candidate's position on the issues was more important to their presidential vote than the candidate's personal qualities. Only 15% of Trump voters said personal qualities were more important. Biden voters, a similar result, but just less of a margin here. 66% of Biden voters said the candidate's position on the issues was most important to their vote versus 30% of Biden voters who said the candidate's personal qualities. And we talked about the issues of importance to voters, but now let's look at it by which candidate they support. So among Trump voters, the economy is the dominant issue. 62% of Trump voters say the economy, the most important issue. 17% crime and safety. Obviously, that was a big message in the last several months from Donald Trump. Coronavirus, only 5% of Trump voters said coronavirus was most important issue to their vote. Look at Biden voters. Among Biden voters, racial inequality is the top issue. 36% of Biden voters say racial inequality is the most important issue to their vote, followed by the coronavirus at 27%. You see crime and safety down at 6%, the economy, 11% of Biden voters said that was most important. Jake, Dan, Abby?
All right, David, thanks so much. And this is fascinating because obviously it's a real reflection of not just what the candidates' messages are. Donald Trump has been, hammering home the point that he's best on the economy and that Joe Biden will, the streets will run red with blood, but also the electorates that they're appealing to. I have to say, I am surprised, though, that coronavirus is not a top issue for either Trump voters or Biden voters in terms of being the top issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear that Biden's voters are much more split about what they think is their top issue than Trump voters, who are much more heavily skewed in the direction of the economy. It tells me that Biden's voters are worried about a lot of different things, and a lot of them are people of color. So they're going to be worried about the issue of racial inequity, which has been front of mind all this year, even through the coronavirus, Jake. I mean, this is a virus that had a disproportionate impact on communities of color. So it doesn't surprise me that between those top two issues, you get a good chunk of the Biden support.
And for the Biden voters, it's not just that racial inequality is a big issue, it's the biggest issue. According to, 36% over coronavirus, over healthcare policy, which was the driving issue in 2018, the economy, crime, and safety. That's a remarkable number. That's a remarkable number, 36%. The top issue Biden voters say that they're going to the polls and focused on is racial inequality.
Well, especially also when you consider the fact that normally healthcare and the economy are the number one.
Exactly, the bread and butter issues.
And this year, it's a very 2020 reflection of where Biden's voters are. Racial inequality, number one, coronavirus, number two. Wolf?
Jake, thank you. We got a key race alert. And take a look at this. This is a bit of a surprise right now. 8% of the estimated vote in Kentucky is in, and Biden is ahead of Trump by about 21,000 votes, 55.3% to 43.1%. Biden ahead in Kentucky right now, 8 electoral votes. 8% of the estimated vote is in. In Indiana right now, Trump is way ahead. Only 2% of the estimated vote is in. He's up by about 25,000 votes. 67.2% to 30.9%. Kentucky, John King, a pretty reliable red state, so I wouldn't necessarily say this is the bottom line, but let's take a closer look at Kentucky right now. Maybe for a few minutes, Biden will be ahead.
I wouldn't say it's the bottom line. And if you're a Democrat at home, especially a Democrat from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, if you want to use your phone to catch a quick screen grab, take a picture, be my guest. Kentucky is blue at the moment, but let's pull it up. Look, we don't expect Kentucky to end blue at the end of the night. Doesn't mean it won't. Doesn't mean it can't. But we certainly don't expect that. This is 77% of what you're seeing on your screen right now is early vote. And what do we know? What do we mean by early vote? We know it was disproportionately Democratic. Joe Biden voters, Democratic voters, were much more likely to vote early by mail, to vote early in person, but especially the mail-in ballots right here to pass them in. So you're looking in right now 54, 55 if you round it up, to 44 if you round it up. Remember, in 2016, President Trump won this state by nearly 30 points. So this is not expected to stay where it is. We're just looking at early votes, and this is one of the quirks we're going to have to go through all night, in states that are competitive and states that are not so competitive, as we don't expect Kentucky will be at the end. We have to walk through transparently with people about why things are different.
You mentioned the Cincinnati suburbs. In northern Kentucky, there's one blue county already up there.
This is 77% early votes. If this holds, if Kenton County, Kentucky holds blue, this would be a huge deal. If it holds blue by that margin, it's a ginormous deal. I wouldn't expect that to happen. But why is that important? Because this is a county that President Trump won. Essentially 60 to 34 if you do the rounding there. Why are we looking at it? Again, we expect Kentucky to be red. Covington, if you've ever flown into the Cincinnati airport, is in Covington, Kentucky. Cincinnati, Ohio is right here. This is a Cincinnati suburban area. And so if the president's going to do well in Ohio, if he's going to do well anywhere where the suburbs matter, which is all the big swing states, North Carolina, Florida, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, we'll see if the suburban revolt against the president continued. This is 2016. Here's where we are right now. Again, Democrats see this, and you have every right to celebrate, but just remember, this is disproportionately early vote. We have a long way to go in the vote count.
In that county, 28% of the estimated vote is in. That's a significant number.
It is, but if it's all early vote, mostly early vote, and then other vote comes in behind it, the traditional vote, we'll see, though. We'll see. Now, Frankfort, you see here in Fayette County, this one we expect to stay blue, right? Fayette County, Lexington, Kentucky here. This is a Democratic county, but you see that margin there, 73% right now. You go back in time, 51%. It was a 10-point race, just shy of 10 points, 9 points 4 years ago. So again, this is one of the things we're going to look at tonight, and we need to be careful early when we go through these states. This is disproportionately early vote, which means we believe it is lopsided in favor of the Democrats. So we just need to be calm and not think it's a final total. But again, as we go through the night, remember where we started, see how much it changes. Is Joe Biden, even in places he's losing, is he running ahead of Hillary Clinton in urban and suburban areas? Because if it's happening in Kentucky, then this is a lot of these areas are a lot like you can find towns like this in North Carolina. You can find towns like this in Georgia. Other places we're going to be looking at tonight for key votes. So let's just pull back out to the rest of it. And again, another thing we're going to look at, and it's early on. So we don't know if this is apples and apples or not until we get through it later. But right now, 78% of the estimated vote in tiny Casey County. President gets 86% when you round up 86% now, 85% 4 years ago. So pretty consistent, right? That's one of the tests we're going to have throughout the night. And again, it's early. We'll see if it changes. But so what are you watching? Is Donald Trump, where is he? Where is he compared to 2016? About the same right here, right now. Let's just move over here and just take a look at it. Lincoln County, 2020, 76 if you round up, 78, 77. So he's running about the same in these places. Again, it's early, so we don't know if that's going to hold, and we'll check back throughout the night because we expect this state to be red in the end, but there are places like this in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in North Carolina, in Georgia, towns just like them that could be very important in other swing states. So we will learn lessons here. Just want to look again over here. Anderson County here, 58 to 39. This is 2020 right now. Go back to 2016. The president wins his county with 72% of the vote. Again, Democrats seeing these early counts would be optimistic. I just want to caution you, this is disproportionately early vote. But again, it's something we're going to watch throughout the night, and we're going to be careful, be transparent with you about what we know about this vote and how contextual it is, if you will. This is not contextual yet, but these are places we will watch. You mentioned that for a reason. You picked that out for a reason. This would be very significant if it holds because the suburbs are the key. If Joe Biden is going to win North Carolina, it's going to be because African Americans turn out and because of the suburbs. And so, again, we talked about this earlier, and we'll continue to talk about it. We expect this to be red in the end. Let's just watch out. It's blue right now. We expect that to be red in the end. It is red right now, but we'll learn lessons from these early states. We always do.
We certainly do. All right, we'll stay on top of Kentucky and Indiana. In the meantime, let's go back to Anderson.
Wolf, John, thanks very much. David Axelrod, I mean, how much of what we know about early voting
disproportionately favoring Democrats is because of President Trump going after early voting, going after the election in general, just saying that it's rigged.
Yeah, no, I think that had a lot to do with it. And there were Republicans, and I'm sure Rick can speak to this, there were Republicans who were very uncomfortable about it because Republicans traditionally have used absentee voting, particularly older Republicans. And so there was a concern that he was discouraging people from voting the way they normally vote. But the question, it did create a disproportionate participation by Republicans on Election Day because so many Democrats voted early. And the question in all these states is, does the Republican surge in these states overcome the advantage that Democrats had in early voting? And that's what we have to wait and see. But Anderson, I just want to say one thing about what John just talked about is just so important because Donald Trump won last time by putting overwhelming support in these rural areas together with a slight win in suburban areas, which are the largest segment of our country. That's where half of America lives. We've seen in 2018, we've seen in polling a big drift toward Democrats in these suburban areas, and particularly among women. The question is, if that continues tonight, where does Donald Trump make up those votes? And now we see in the exit poll, college-educated voters are slightly more participating, non-college whites who are his base less participating. These are the numbers that would concern me if I were sitting in Trump's headquarters right now.
Participating more than they were in
2016. Yeah. It is now drifting toward more participation by college-educated voters who favor Biden.
And that was so interesting to watch during the Biden campaign, which is that Biden would venture into previously red areas in a state like Ohio and try and chip away at what he saw as the advantage of Donald Trump. He did it over and over and over again. So did the campaign, because they understood that if you could just chip away at the edges of some of this stuff, that it would be really important. But one thing I also want to say about looking at the Trump and Biden voters, there is nothing in common. I mean, on the coronavirus, and I know our colleagues were talking about this a little bit before, but it cannot be said enough that Trump voters rated it, only 5% said it was the most important issue to their vote. Racial inequality was the only thing that was less, and that was 3%. However, Biden voters, racial inequality, issue number one, 36%, and COVID, 28%. And then came health care. The only thing the voters seem to have in common is that they care about health care. And that's an issue that, as we know, the Biden campaign was talking about over and over again, including during the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett and what the Supreme Court would do. These are two, it's a divided country and a divided electorate. I guess that goes without saying,
well,
but
also just
it's stunning.
the age of voters. I think for younger voters, the existence of racial inequality rates much higher as a priority.
Because you're dealing with the most diverse American generation ever. So even if you're white, you got a best friend who's not, you got an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend who's not, you're in school with somebody who's not. You look at a kindergarten right now. I mean, kindergarten looks like the United Nations in this country. So the younger you get, the more all of this rug burn over race is a personal issue for you as a young voter. But if you just take all this stuff all together, the initial issue set that we were talking about made me very nervous. I was having rumblies in my tumbly. I was like, I don't like these issues because it looks like, maybe it's more favorable to Trump. But as you look at the actual demographics, much more favorable to Biden.
What do you point to?
Well, the fact that you have such a big drop in the number of white voters compared to last time. The fact that you do have, a lot more of it seems like there's the young people are hanging in there, maybe growing a little bit. A tiny uptick with the older voters, but some of those older voters are breaking more toward Biden than usual. So in other words, we're on a little bit of a roller coaster here, a little bit of a seesaw. You may get seasick tonight looking at these exit things. The issues cut one way, the demographics. There's something happening out there we don't know yet, and we're going to have to wait to see.
I'm going to agree with Van that I was feeling much more confident with these early exits than I did.
Your stomach is rumbling.
Yeah, my stomach is now rumbling.
You guys are going to be basket cases.
Yeah.
I thought it was the subway. I didn't realize it was you guys on the other side.
You're going to hear lots of rumbling both sides. No, the college educated. Now, first off, these are early exits, and I've always, I've witnessed this in my own elections, that blue-collar workers, non-college educated, vote after work. They don't vote during the day like seniors do. So the uptick in seniors, you'd expect that because they vote early. They don't vote late at night, where workers do. So I think that number is going to change. But the fact that it's more college educated, that's not good for Donald Trump. The fact that it's down from 71% white to 65% white, that's not good for Donald Trump. So both of those things certainly give me pause as to whether this electorate is actually lining up. And then the final thing is just look at the votes. I mean, Covington County, suburban Cincinnati, and the Kentucky side. I understand it's early. I understand it's mail-in, and I don't want to read in too much. But those are not good numbers for Donald Trump. I don't think anyone expected him to do as well this time in Covington than before, but those are still not good.
We should also point out these early exit polls are not just people who've shown up today to vote. Some of them are also for people who have voted early. CNN's coverage of Election Night in America continues right now.
We're standing by for the first big round of poll closings, but right now more early votes are coming in. We have a key race alert. Let's take a look at Kentucky right now. 11% of the estimated vote is now in. It's very close. 1,400 vote lead right now for Biden over Trump in Kentucky, 49.5% to 48.9%. 11 electoral votes in Kentucky very early. In Indiana, 5% of the estimated vote is in. Trump has a significant lead already. 41,700 vote lead over Biden, 62.9% to 35.1%. We're about to get our first chance to make projections in this historic race for the White House. We're counting down to the top of the hour, 7 p.m. here on the East Coast. That's when the last polls are scheduled to close in Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. A total of 60 electoral votes are up for grabs in those states. Remember, it takes 270 electoral votes to win this election. Georgia is the key battleground in the hour ahead. It could give us an early sense of how the night is going. If Joe Biden appears on track to turn Georgia blue, or if President Trump holds on to that traditionally red state he won 4 years ago. Jake, Georgia is competitive for the first time in decades.
That's right, Wolf, and we're watching the voting in Georgia and other battleground states. We're seeing voters turn out in these final minutes before polls close in Norcross, Georgia, and suburban Atlanta. But we're told voting is being extended at some locations in at least 2 Georgia counties. Right now, let's check in with our reporters covering the campaigns. Jeff Zeleny, it is crunch time for the Biden campaign.
Jake, there is no question about that. And Joe Biden right now at this hour is at his home here in Wilmington, surrounded by his family, getting ready to watch these returns and early projections. I'm told by a friend that he is taking in the weight of all of this. Jake, we should point out now, before the returns come in, that he would be the oldest president ever elected if he should win tonight. And it wraps a career starting out his presidential campaign run. This is his 3rd run. When he ran the first time in the 1988 campaign, he was the youngest candidate. So throughout the day, he's been steeped in nostalgia, starting it with a visit to his son Beau's grave here just outside of Wilmington, as well as the grave of his late wife and baby daughter. That has become a central part of his narrative as he has campaigned for president. He moved on to his boyhood home in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And Jake, we are told that he assigned one of the walls of the home. It says this: "From this house to the White House with the grace of God. Joe Biden, November 3rd, 2020. So it is with this nostalgia as Joe Biden is settling in to watch his fate in this presidential campaign tonight, Jake.
That's right, Jeff. And I think he wrote a similar message in 2008 when he was running for vice president, except instead of the living room, he did it in the bedroom of that Scranton house. Let's go to Caitlin Collins now, covering President Trump. Caitlin, what are you hearing from the Trump team tonight?
Well, we haven't heard that President Trump has written anything on the walls of the White House, but we did just hear from the campaign manager, Bill Stepien, who held a call with reporters. And, Jake, before these polls have even closed across the U.S., they're expressing optimism in what they are seeing. Of course, this is just from the Trump campaign. This is their view of things. But so far, they say they feel good about it. And, of course, the question is, what are they seeing actually in these states? They did say one thing, Jake. They believe in Florida that if these early votes are counted, they believe it's going to be in Biden's favor, but will later shift to their favor. And one thing their senior advisor, Jason Miller, said is the campaign, including the president, feel better at this point than they did in 2016. Of course, Jake, if you were at that election night party for Donald Trump 4 years ago, at this point, they did not even think they had a chance of winning the election. So that's not really saying much. But one thing that Bill Stepien did say is not what we heard from the press secretary earlier. She said they believed it'd be a landslide. He conceded it is going to be a tight race, Jake.
All right, Caitlin Collins, thanks so much. Let's go to David Chalian now. He has some new exit polls.
Jake, looking at these two key states coming up, Georgia and Virginia, it's fascinating how much they look like the nation overall. In Georgia, the most important issue to voters, the economy, 36%, racial inequality, 22%, coronavirus, 14%. And which is more important to do now, containing the coronavirus or rebuilding the economy? In Georgia, a slim majority says containing the coronavirus. 42% say rebuilding the economy. Virginia looks similar, and I have to remind you, these early exit polls are representative of the whole electorate, no matter how you voted. If you voted early, by mail absentee, or in person today on Election Day, that's all included in these preliminary exit polls. The economy, again, the top issue for Virginia voters today, 35%. Racial inequality, 23% say that was the most important issue. And coronavirus places third here again in Virginia, 17%. Again, we asked, which is more important, containing the coronavirus or rebuilding the economy? This is what we see nationally. It's what we just saw in Georgia. A slim majority, 53% of Virginia voters in this election say containing the coronavirus is a higher priority than the 42% who say rebuilding the economy.
All right, David Chalian, fascinating. Thanks so much. And we are waiting for, at the top of the hour, some key Florida counties are going to start reporting actual votes. Florida, obviously, hotly contested. As the former senator and current senator, former Governor Rick Scott said to me on Sunday, it is a 50-50 state, and it's just a matter of who gets their voters to the polls.
And sources in both campaigns are telling me it is so incredibly tight. Democrats I'm talking to say that they feel better about the post-work Democratic vote, that more Democrats have been coming out in some of their key counties, but looks like it could be just like Florida usually is. We'll see, though. Look, this is exciting. This is the first time we're going to see results from the swingiest of swing states.
Yeah, I mean, this is the fun part of the night. Florida will tell us a little bit, but especially they will have an earlier count. They know how to do mail-in votes. They know how to do early votes. And it will tell us a little bit more about whether we'll have a long night or a shorter night tonight, which will be good. Going back to what Rick Scott told you, turnout, obviously, in Florida is so key. But what is so hard for Democrats is that their voters are some of the hardest to turn out in that state, which is why Democrats I speak to are optimistic, but they know it is tough. It is hard what they have to do, especially with the coronavirus.
Yeah, Democrats, people on the Biden campaign are far more optimistic about, obviously, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, but also Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida is actually rather far down on their list. Wolf?
All right, Jake, thanks very much. Let's get a sense of how soon we expect to get votes from two crucial states that are coming up. Pamela Brown's over at the voting desk watching this closely.
Yeah, as we were just hearing, this is an exciting part of the night because we are about to find out results in those two important states in the South, Florida and Georgia. We turn to Florida first and look at the process there. We expect it to be fast. We expect the first results to be a big chunk of early votes with some Election Day votes mixed in. That's because Georgia had a 2-week head start prepping ballots. Georgia's also been using high-speed scanners, so all they have to do when polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern time in most of the state is press a button. They'll get the results. We know that polls are open a little bit later in at least one county there in Georgia, but we're going to be finding out the bulk soon. And then you look at Florida, it's a well-oiled machine when it comes to counting early votes. They've had a 5-week head start prepping ballots there. Also in Florida, they've already counted most early in-person and most absentee votes. What hasn't been counted yet are Election Day votes and the rest of the pre-election day votes. So election officials in both states are saying right now it's been smooth and steady today. Bottom line, Wolf, as far as Georgia and Florida are concerned, election night should be off to a quick start.
That's good to hear. John King, We see Indiana and Kentucky now both red, at least right now.
At least right now, smooth and steady. Let's hope we keep saying those words throughout the night as we count the votes. Right now, Indiana and Kentucky, very early results. We'll keep counting them, but that's where we expect them to be. Kentucky was blue early on. It has moved to red. Here's something we don't expect to be the case at the end of the night. Donald Trump leading right now in the popular vote, 73,000 votes ahead. We know he lost it in 2016. The expectation is he will again. But where are we going? As Pam just noted, we're going to two of the most interesting laboratories of the night, two states that will tell us a ton about who's going to win the presidency and who came out to vote. Let's start in Florida. We will get the first wave of votes here. This is one state where the Democrats had a slight edge, but not as big an edge as they had in other states in early voting. So let's watch when those results come in. We know the history here, but let's go back to the 2016 map to do it. Florida is always close, a point or two either way. 49 to 48 if you round up 4 years ago. Absolutely critical for the Democrats down here. Palm Beach County, Broward County, Miami-Dade. Democrats have to run it up there. President Trump has to repeat what he did 4 years ago. We've been talking about this a little bit in the earlier counties, but just look, this is Georgia and Alabama. Northern Florida votes like the South. And so you look here in these counties, 57% here. You move over here as you come across 63% here. Small counties, not a lot of people, but this is the key to the president. Run it up in the small counties and get the math. And when Florida's close, it comes down to the I-4 corridor. And what we're going to watch for tonight is this. Number one, Democrats in the suburbs. You think of Orlando as a recreational place. Yes, it is. But you have Latinos. You have growing suburbs. Orange County. Hillary Clinton carried with 60% 4 years ago. What does the president do there tonight? What does Joe Biden do there tonight? You move over here. Wolf, remember election night 2016. In the middle of our count, early in the night, I had a call from a Democrat working the ground here in Pinellas County who said, we are bleeped. I won't say the word on television. Pinellas County went red, not by a lot, but you see it going right there. That'll be a key thing. If you go back to Barack Obama's wins, right here. So do the Democrats get the suburbs back? Do they get retirees on this side of the coast back? That is a critical test tonight. We'll stay on the 2016 map for a minute. Again, Florida, 29 electoral votes. The president cannot win re-election without him, without a doubt. So we'll watch the Florida, and then we move just up to the north, a state that we have not talked about in presidential politics for some time on election night because it has been so red, not since Bill Clinton. Have Democrats carried this state? The big test here, do African Americans turn out in Atlanta? And how do the Democrats do in the suburbs around Atlanta, around Columbus, in Augusta? You see all of this red down here. Absolutely critical for the president in Florida and in Georgia and in North Carolina. Run it up in the small rural counties because he knows Democrats are coming out to vote in the cities and Republicans are suffering under his leadership in the suburbs. Wolf.